Republican elected officials is not protected. The creation of the Raskin Doctrine actually reveals the weakness of the House manager's case. Elected officials, and we reviewed this in depth yesterday, under Supreme Court precedent, Wood and Bond, and by the way, Bond didn't burn his draft card. He actually still had it. It was part of his defense. But in Bond and in Wood, the court clearly directed all to know that elected officials hold the highest protections of speech, the highest protections. And I remind you why. Because you all need to be free to have robust political discussion, because your discussion is about how our lives are going to go. And that shouldn't be squelched by any political party on either side of the aisle, no matter who's the majority party at the time. Why would the House managers make up their own legal standard? I'll tell you why. Because they know they cannot satisfy the existing constitutional standard set forth by the United States Supreme Court that has existed for more than half a century. They argue Mr. Trump, as an elected official, has no First Amendment rights. It's the complete opposite of the law. We've shown you without contradiction that is wrong. They also know that they cannot satisfy the three-part test of Brandenburg, as elucidated in the Bible Believers case. There was absolutely no evidence that Mr. Trump's words were directed to inciting imminent lawless action. There was no evidence that Mr. Trump intended his words to incite violence, and the violence was pre-planned and premeditated by a group of lawless actors who must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, but it proves that his words weren't what set this into motion. What was the incitement? With no ability and no evidence to satisfy the existing constitutional standards, what do the House managers to do?
3904.
They had to make up their own law.
49.
This is not only intellectually dishonest, folks, it's downright scary. What type of precedent would be set if the Senate did vote to convict? Can Congress now ignore Supreme Court precedent on the contours of protected free speech? Will Congress be permitted to continually make up their own legal standards and apply those new standards to elected officials' speech? This would allow Congress to use the awesome impeachment power as a weapon to impeach their fellow colleagues in the opposing party. This is not a precedent that this Senate can set here today. If the Senate endorses the House Democrats' absurd new theory, you will set a precedent that will trouble leaders from both parties, literally, for centuries to come. But that will not be the only disgraceful precedent to come from this case. This has been perhaps the most unfair and flagrantly unconstitutional proceeding in the history of the United States Senate. For the first time in history, Congress has asserted the right to try and punish a former president who is a private citizen. Nowhere in the Constitution is the power enumerated or implied. Congress has no authority, no right, and no business holding a trial of citizen Trump, let alone a trial to deprive him of fundamental civil rights. There was mention of a January exception argument. The January exception argument is a creation of the House managers own conduct by delaying. They sat on the article. They could have tried the president while he was still in office if they really believed he was an imminent threat. They didn't. The January exception is a red herring. It's nonsense. Because federal, state, and local authorities can investigate. Their January exception always expires on January 20th. House Democrats and this deeply unfair trial have shamefully trampled every tradition, norm, and standard of due process in a way I've never, ever seen before. Mr. Trump was given no right to review the so-called evidence against him at trial. He was given no opportunity to question its propriety. He was given no chance to engage in fact-finding. Much of what was introduced by the House was unverified, second or third-hand reporting cribbed from a biased news media, including stories based on anonymous sources whose identities aren't even known to them, never mind my client. They manufactured and doctored evidence, so much so that they had to withdraw it. We had the evidence after we started the trial. They went on for 2 days. So in the evening, I was able to go back and take a really close look at the stuff. Myself and Mr. Castor and Ms. Bateman and Mr. Brennan, we all worked hard and looked at the evidence, 4 volumes of books in little tiny print. And we literally had, 12, 14 hours to really look at the evidence before we had to go on. And just in that short time of looking at the evidence, we saw them fabricating Twitter accounts. We saw the masked man sitting at his desk with the New York Times there. And when we looked closely, we found that the date was wrong, the check had been added. They fabricated evidence. They made it up. They never addressed that in their closing, as though it were acceptable, as though it were all right, as though that's the way it should be done here in the Senate of the United States of America. Fraud, flat out, fraud. Where I come from, in the courts that I practice in, there are very harsh repercussions for what they pulled in this trial. As we have shown, the House managers were caught creating false representations of tweets, manipulating videos, and introducing into the record completely discredited lies such as the Fine People hoax as factual evidence. Most of what the House managers have said and shown you would be inadmissible in any respectable court of law. They were not trying a case. They were telling a political tale, a fable, and a patently false one at that. House Democrats have denied due process and rushed the impeachment because they know that a fair trial would reveal Mr. Trump's innocence of the charges against him. The more actual evidence that comes out, the clearer it is that this was a pre-planned and premeditated attack, which his language in no way incited. Because their case is so weak, the House managers have taken a kitchen sink approach to the supposedly single article of impeachment. They allege that Mr. Trump incited the January 6th violence. They allege that he abused power by attempting to pressure Georgia Secretary of State Raffensperger to undermine the results of the 2020 election. And they allege that he gravely and endangered the democratic system by interfering with the peaceful transition of power. At least three things there. Under the Senate rules, each of these allegations must have been alleged in a separate article of impeachment. I need not remind this chamber that Rule 23 of the Rules of Procedure and Practice in the Senate when sitting on impeachment trials provides, in pertinent part, that an article of impeachment shall not be divisible thereon. Why is that? Because the article at issue here alleges multiple wrongs in the single article, it would be impossible to know if 2/3 of the members agreed on the entire article or just on parts of it as the basis for a vote to convict. Based on this alone, the Senate must vote to acquit Mr. Trump. You got to at least obey your own rules if it's not the Constitution you're going to obey. In short, this impeachment has been a complete charade from beginning to end. The entire spectacle has been nothing but the unhinged pursuit of a long-standing political vendetta against Mr. Trump by the opposition party. As we have shown, Democrats were obsessed with impeaching Mr. Trump from the very beginning of his term. The House Democrats tried to impeach him in his first year. They tried to impeach him in his second year. They did impeach him in his third year, and they impeached him again in his fourth year. And now they have conducted a phony impeachment show trial when he is a private citizen out of office. This hastily orchestrated and unconstitutional circus is the House Democrats' final desperate attempt to accomplish their obsessive desire of the last 5 years. Since the moment he stepped into the political arena, since my client stepped in, they have been possessed by an overwhelming zeal to vanquish an independent-minded outsider from the midst and to shame, demean, silence, and demonize his supporters. Since the moment he stepped into the political arena, my client, an electoral challenge. We heard one of the congressmen on the screen. If you don't impeach him, he might be elected again. Talking, and it will not be so long. And before I start my prepared closing, I really want to clean up a few things from the mess that was the closing. Anyone, defamatory narrative is a brazenly dishonest attempt to smear, to cancel constitutional cancel culture, their number one political opponent, taking neutral statements, commonplace political rhetoric, removing words and facts from context, and ascribing to them the most sinister and malevolent intentions possible. Their story was based not on evidence, but on the sheer personal and political animus. The flimsy theory of incitement you heard from the House managers could be used to impeach, indict, or expel countless other political leaders. Many leading figures in other parties have engaged in far more incendiary and dangerous rhetoric. And we played some of it. I'm not going to replay it. I'm not going to replay you the words. You all saw the evidence. I'm not going to replay you mob scenes. I don't want to give those people another platform, any more view from the American people as to what they did. They should be canceled. Democrat politicians spent months prior to January 6th attacking the very legitimacy of our nation's most cherished institutions and traditions. They didn't just question the integrity of one election, they challenged the integrity of our entire nation. Everything from our founding fathers, our Constitution, Declaration of Independence, law enforcement officers, and United States military. They said that our society was rooted in hatred. They even said that America deserved, and I'll quote, a reckoning. As you heard yesterday, throughout the summer, Democrat leaders, including the current president and vice president, repeatedly made comments that provided moral comfort to mobs attacking police officers. During that time, many officers across the country were injured. As we all know, 2 sheriff's deputies in Los Angeles were ambushed and shot at point-blank range. Members of this very body have been in danger. Senators from Maine to Kentucky and most points in between have been harassed by mobs. Last August, a menacing left-wing mob swarmed Senator Rand Paul and his wife as they left the White House, and they had to be rescued by police. For months, our federal courthouse in Portland was placed under siege by violent anarchists who attacked law enforcement officers daily and repeatedly and tried to set fire to the building. Speaker Pelosi did not call the violent siege of the federal building an insurrection. She called the federal agents protecting the courthouse stormtroopers. The White House complex was besieged by mobs that threw bricks, rocks, and bottles at Secret Service agents, set fire to an historic structure, and breached a security fence to infiltrate the Treasury grounds. When my client's administration sent in the National Guard to secure the nation's capital city amidst the violence, Democrat leaders demanded that the forces be withdrawn. The Washington, D.C. mayor said the presence of the National Guard was an affront to the safety of the district. It must be fully investigated whether political leadership here in Washington, D.C. took an inadequate and irresponsible forced posture on January 6th because of their commitment to the false narrative of what happened last June. Hopefully, we can all now agree that the administration acted properly by taking action to stop a riotous mob, establishing an appropriate security perimeter, and prevent the White House from potentially being overrun. The House managers argued this week that an alleged brief delay in issuing a public statement from Mr. Trump on January 6th was somehow evidence that he committed incitement or supported the violence. Yet for months last year, Joe Biden, Vice President Harris, and countless of other Democrats repeatedly refused to condemn the extremism as riots were occurring daily, as businesses were being ramshackled, as neighborhoods were being burned, as bombs were exploding. They repeatedly refused to tell their violent supporters to stand down. Some even suggested that the mob's actions were justified. Vice President Harris literally urged her followers to donate money to a fund to bail out the violent, extreme rioters so that they could get out and continue to do it over and over again. She later said that those folks were not going to let up and that they should not. All of this was far closer to the actual definition of incitement than anything President Trump has ever said or done, never mind what he said on the 6th. It's a hypocrisy. It's a hypocrisy that the House managers have laid at the feet of this chamber. The House managers suggested that this recent history is irrelevant to the current proceedings. But not only is Democrats' behavior surrounding last year's riots highly relevant as precedent, and not only does it reveal the dishonesty and insincerity of this entire endeavor, it also provides crucial context that should inform our understanding of the events that took place on January 6th. Many of the people who infiltrated the Capitol took pictures of themselves and posted them on social media. To some, it seems, they thought that it was all a game. They apparently believed that violent mobs, destruction of property, rioting, assaulting police, and vandalizing historic treasures was somehow now acceptable in the United States. Where might they have gotten that idea? I would suggest to you that it was not from Mr. Trump. It was not Mr. Trump. It was not anyone in the Republican Party that spent the 6 months immediately prior to the Capitol assault giving rhetorical aid and comfort to mobs, making excuses for rioters, celebrating radicalism, and explaining that angry, frustrated, and marginalized people were entitled to blow off steam like that. Let me be very clear. There can be no excuse for the depraved actions of the rioters here at the Capitol or anywhere else across this country. 100% of those guilty of committing crimes deserve lengthy prison sentences for their shameful and depraved conduct. But this trial has raised the question about words, actions, and consequences. As a nation, we must ask ourselves, how did we arrive at this place where rioting and pillaging would become commonplace? I submit to you that it was month after month of political leaders and media personalities bloodthirsty for ratings, glorifying civil unrest, and condemning the reasonable law enforcement measures that are required to quell violent mobs. Hopefully, we can all leave this chamber in uniform agreement that all rioting is bad, and that law enforcement deserves our respect and support. That has been Mr. Trump's position from the very beginning. The real question in this case is, who is ultimately responsible for such acts of mayhem and violence when they are committed? The House Democrats want two different standards, one for themselves and one for their political opposition. They have carried out a grossly unconstitutional effort to punish Mr. Trump for protected First Amendment speech. It's an egregious violation of his constitutional rights. Since he uttered not a single word encouraging violence, this action can only be seen as an effort to censor disfavored political speech and discriminate against a disapproved viewpoint. It is an unprecedented action with the potential to do grave and lasting damage to both the presidency and the separation of powers and the future of democratic self-government. Yesterday, we played you a video of countless Democrat members of the Senate urging their supporters to fight. We showed you those videos not because we think you should be forcibly removed from office for saying those things, but because we know you should not be forcibly removed from office for saying those things. But recognize the hypocrisy. Yesterday, in questioning, House Manager Raskin admitted that the House Democrats had invented an entirely new legal standard. In fact, they've created a new legal theory, the Raskin Doctrine. The Raskin Doctrine is based on nothing more than determining protected speech based on the party label next to your name. Regardless of what you have heard or what you have seen from the House managers, if you pay close attention, you will see that any speech made by Democrat elected officials is protected speech, while any speech made by Republican elected officials is not protected. The creation of the Raskin Doctrine actually reveals the weakness of the House manager's case. Elected officials, and we reviewed this in depth yesterday, under Supreme Court precedent, Wood and Bond, and by the way, Bond didn't burn his draft card. He actually still had it. It was part of his defense. But in Bond and in Wood, the court clearly directed all to know that elected officials hold the highest protections of speech, the highest protections. And I remind you why. Because you all need to be free to have robust political discussion, because your discussion is about how our lives are going to go. And that shouldn't be squelched by any political party on either side of the aisle, no matter who's the majority party at the time. Why would the House managers make up their own legal standard? I'll tell you why. Because they know they cannot satisfy the existing constitutional standard set forth by the United States Supreme Court that has existed for more than half a century. They argue Mr. Trump, as an elected official, has no First Amendment rights. It's the complete opposite of the law. We've shown you without contradiction that is wrong. They also know that they cannot satisfy the three-part test of Brandenburg, as elucidated in the Bible Believers case. There was absolutely no evidence that Mr. Trump's words were directed to inciting imminent lawless action. There was no evidence that Mr. Trump intended his words to incite violence, and the violence was pre-planned and premeditated by a group of lawless actors who must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, but it proves that his words weren't what set this into motion. What was the incitement? With no ability and no evidence to satisfy the existing constitutional standards, what are the House managers to do? They had to make up their own law. This is not only intellectually dishonest, folks, it's downright scary. What type of precedent would be set if the Senate did vote to convict? Can Congress now ignore Supreme Court precedent on the contours of protected free speech? Will Congress be permitted to continually make up their own legal standards and apply those new standards to elected officials' speech? This would allow Congress to use the awesome impeachment power as a weapon to impeach their fellow colleagues in the opposing party. This is not a precedent that this Senate can set here today. If the Senate endorses the House Democrats' absurd new theory, you will set a precedent that will trouble leaders from both parties, literally, for centuries to come. But that will not be the only disgraceful precedent to come from this case. This has been perhaps the most unfair and flagrantly unconstitutional proceeding in the history of the United States Senate. For the first time in history, Congress has asserted the right to try and punish a former president who is a private citizen. Nowhere in the Constitution is the power enumerated or implied. Congress has no authority, no right, and no business holding a trial of Citizen Trump, let alone a trial to deprive him of fundamental civil rights. There was mention of a January exception argument. The January exception argument is a creation of the House manager's own conduct by delaying. They sat on the article. They could have tried the president while he was still in office if they really believed he was an imminent threat. They didn't. The January exception is a red herring. It's nonsense. Because federal, state, and local authorities can investigate. Their January exception always expires on January 20th. House Democrats and this deeply unfair trial have shamefully trampled every tradition, norm, and standard of due process in a way I've never, ever seen before. Mr. Trump was given no right to review the so-called evidence against him at trial. He was given no opportunity to question its propriety. He was given no chance to engage in fact-finding. Much of what was introduced by the House was unverified, second or third-hand reporting cribbed from a biased news media, including stories based on anonymous sources whose identities aren't even known to them, never mind my client. They manufactured and doctored evidence, so much so that they had to withdraw it. We had the evidence after we started the trial. They went on for 2 days. So in the evening, I was able to go back and take a really close look at the stuff. Myself and Mr. Castor and Ms. Bateman and Mr. Brennan, we all worked hard and looked at the evidence, 4 volumes of books in little tiny print. And we literally had, 12, 14 hours to really look at the evidence before we had to go on. And just in that short time of looking at the evidence, we saw them fabricating Twitter accounts. We saw the masked man sitting at his desk with the New York Times there. And when we looked closely, we found that the date was wrong, the check had been added. They fabricated evidence. They made it up. They never addressed that in their closing, as though it were acceptable, as though it were all right, as though that's the way it should be done here in the Senate of the United States of America. Fraud, flat out, fraud. Where I come from, in the courts that I practice in, there are very harsh repercussions for what they pulled in this trial. As we have shown The House managers were caught creating false representations of tweets, manipulating videos, and introducing into the record completely discredited lies such as the Fine People hoax as factual evidence. Most of what the House managers have said and shown you would be inadmissible in any respectable court of law. They were not trying a case. They were telling a political tale, a fable, and a patently false one at that. House Democrats have denied due process and rushed the impeachment because they know that a fair trial would reveal Mr. Trump's innocence of the charges against him. The more actual evidence that comes out, the clearer it is that this was a pre-planned and premeditated attack, which his language in no way incited. Because their case is so weak, the House managers have taken a kitchen sink approach to the supposedly single article of impeachment. They allege that Mr. Trump incited the January 6th violence. They allege that he abused power by attempting to pressure Georgia Secretary of State Raffensperger to undermine the results of the 2020 election. And they allege that he gravely and endangered the democratic system by interfering with the peaceful transition of power. There's at least three things there. Under the Senate rules, each of these allegations must have been alleged in a separate article of impeachment. I need not remind this chamber that Rule 23 of the Rules of Procedure and Practice in the Senate when sitting on impeachment trials provides, in pertinent part, that an article of impeachment shall not be divisible thereon. Why is that? Because the article at issue here alleges multiple wrongs in the single article, it would be impossible to know if 2/3 of the members agreed on the entire article or just on parts of it as the basis for a vote to convict. Based on this alone, the Senate must vote to acquit Mr. Trump. You got to at least obey your own rules if it's not the Constitution you're going to obey. In short, this impeachment has been a complete charade from beginning to end. The entire spectacle has been nothing but the unhinged pursuit of a long-standing political vendetta against Mr. Trump by the opposition party. As we have shown, Democrats were obsessed with impeaching Mr. Trump from the very beginning of his term. The House Democrats tried to impeach him in his first year. They tried to impeach him in his second year. They did impeach him in his third year, and they impeached him again in his fourth year. And now they have conducted a phony impeachment show trial when he is a private citizen out of office. This hastily orchestrated and unconstitutional circus is the House Democrats' final desperate attempt to accomplish their obsessive desire of the last 5 years. Since the moment he stepped into the political arena, since my client stepped in, they have been possessed by an overwhelming zeal to vanquish an independent-minded outsider from the midst and to shame, demean, silence, and demonize his supporters in the desperate hope that they will never, ever pose an electoral challenge. We heard one of the congressmen on the screen. If you don't impeach him, he might be elected again. That's the fear. That's what's driving this impeachment. When you deliberate over your decision, there are 4 distinct grounds under which you must acquit my client. First is jurisdiction. There is no jurisdiction. And if you believe that, you still get to say it. 2, Rule 23. It had to be divisible. Each allegation had to be singularly set out in front of you so it could be voted on and to see if 2/3 of you think that they proved that case or not. They didn't do that. You got to ask yourself why. They know the Senate rules. They got them, and so did I. Why'd they do it? Because they hadn't investigated, first of all. But also, what they found out as they were preparing all of this, they couldn't do it. So if they threw as much in as they could and made as many bold, bald allegations as they could, then maybe 2/3 of you would fall for it. That's why the rules don't allow it to go that way. Due process, I've exhausted that subject. It's a really good reason for all of you in this chamber, to stop the politics, to read the Constitution and apply it to this proceeding, and acknowledge that the lack of due process, way over the top, shocking, and you must not stand for it. And of course, the First Amendment, the actual facts of this case. There were no words of incitement. 4 grounds. Nobody gets to tell you which ground to pick, and nobody gets to tell you how many grounds to consider. Senators, do not let House Democrats take this manacle crusade any further. The Senate does not have to go down this dark path of enmity and division. You do not have to indulge the impeachment lust, the dishonesty, and the hypocrisy. It is time to bring this unconstitutional political theater to an end. It is time to allow our nation to move forward. It is time to address the real business pressing this nation: the pandemic, our economy, racial inequality, economic and social inequality. These are the things that you need to be thinking and working on for all of us in America. All of us. With your vote, you can defend the Constitution. You can protect due process. And you can allow America's healing to begin. I urge the Senate to acquit and vindicate the Constitution of this great republic. Thank you.
Proceed.
provides, in pertinent part, that an article of impeachment shall not be divisible thereon. All of us. With your vote, you can defend the Constitution, you can protect due process, and you can allow America's healing to begin. I urge the Senate to acquit and vindicate the Constitution of this great republic. Thank you.
Who yields time?
Mr. President, Senators, I understand, I'm told we have around 27 minutes, but I will return all of that, but perhaps 5 back to you. There's just a few things that I need to address. And so in an extraordinary and perhaps unprecedented act of self-restraint on my part, I will resist the opportunity to rebut every single false and illogical thing that you just heard. And I am going to be able to return to you, perhaps 22 or 23 minutes. Few points. One, we have definitely made some progress in the last few days, because a few days ago, the president's team, although I think it was perhaps a member who has since left the team, lectured us that this was not an insurrection and said that the impeachment managers were outrageous in using the word insurrection. Today, counsel in his closing statement said it was a violent insurrection, and he denounced it. And I would certainly love to see President Trump also call it a violent insurrection and denounce it too. And I believe, although I don't have a verbatim text, that counsel called for long sentences for the people who were involved. Again, I would love to hear that come from the president as well. The distinguished counsel complains that there's no precedent with the developed body of law that the Senate has for impeaching and convicting a president who incites violent insurrection against the Congress and the government of the United States. Well, I suppose that's true because it never occurred to any other president of the United States, from George Washington to John Adams to Thomas Jefferson to James Madison to James Monroe to Abraham Lincoln to Ronald Reagan, to George W. Bush, to Barack Obama, to incite a violent insurrection against the Union. You're right, we've got no precedent for that. And so they think that that somehow is a mark in their favor. That's a score for them, that this Senate has to be the first one to define incitement of violent insurrection against the Union. And so the gentleman puts it on me. He says, inciting a president for committing incitement to violent insurrection against the Union is the new Raskin Doctrine. We've tried to convince him that there are well-known principles and elements of incitement which we have talked to you about ad nauseum, and that this is an intrinsically, inherently fact-based judgment. But if that is the Raskin Doctrine, that a president of the United States cannot incite violent insurrection against the Union and the Congress, then I embrace it, and I take it as an honor. Most law professors never even get a doctrine named after them. So I will accept that. And finally, the counsel goes back to Julian Bond's case, because I think in the final analysis, their best argument, as pathetically weak as it is really about the First Amendment. But remember, they keep talking about stifling President Trump's speech. Someone tell me when his speech has ever been stifled. He says exactly what he wants, whenever he wants. If and when you convict him for incitement of insurrection, he will continue to say whatever he wants on that day. Remember, they referred yesterday to interference with his liberty, which I found absolutely bizarre, because everybody knows that he will not spend 1 minute in prison or jail from conviction on these charges. It is a civil remedy to protect all of us, to protect the entire country, our children, our Constitution, our future. That's what impeachment, trial, conviction are all about. are all about. Julian Bond. See, I knew Julian Bond, so forgive me. Most people say, don't even respond to this stuff. I got to respond to this, okay? Julian Bond was a civil rights activist who decided to go into politics, like the people in this room, like all of us who are in politics. And they tried to keep him out. He was a member of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which really launched the voting rights movement in America. There's a great story that Bob Moses tells in his book called Radical Equations about, he was a graduate student in mathematics at Harvard, and he went down to Mississippi. You know why? Because he saw a picture in the New York Times of black civil rights protesters, college students, I think in North Carolina, AT&T, and he saw a picture of them on the cover of the New York Times, and they were sitting in at a lunch counter, and he looked at the picture and he said, they looked the way that I felt. They looked the way that I felt, and he said he had to go down south to Mississippi, and they launched the voting rights movement. That's where the phrase "one person, one vote" comes from. It was not invented by the Supreme Court. They would go door to door to try to register people to vote. But anyway, Julian Bond was part of that movement. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, nonviolence. It was the end and it was the means, nonviolence. And he ran for the state legislature in Georgia, a path other civil rights activists followed, like our great, late, beloved colleague John Lewis, who's in our hearts today. And when he got elected, they wanted to try to keep him from being sworn into the Georgia legislature. And so they said, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee is taking a position against the Vietnam War. You're a member of SNCC. We're not going to admit you because you took a position against the Vietnam War. And the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, said you cannot prevent someone from swearing an oath to become a member of a legislative body because of a position that they took or a group they were a part of took before they got sworn in. That's the exact opposite of Donald Trump. He got elected to office. He swore an oath to the Constitution to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. He served as president for 4 years, right up until the end, when he wanted to exercise his rights under the imaginary January exception, and he incited a violent mob and insurrection to come up here, and we all know what happened. He is being impeached and convicted for violating his oath of office that he took. He's not being prevented from taking his oath in the first place. The First Amendment's on our side. He tried to overturn the will of the people, the voice of the people. He lost that election by more than 7 million votes. Some people don't want to admit it. Counsel for the president could not bring themselves to admit that the election's over. In answer to the question from the distinguished gentleman from Vermont, he refused to answer that. He said it was irrelevant, despite all of the evidence you've heard about the big lie and how that set the stage for his.
Joining me now is former President Trump's attorney, Michael van der Veen. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Let's get right into those words that we heard from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. He ended the trial with this passionate speech about President Trump's involvement in the insurrection. During it, he said that the former president is still liable for everything he did during his period in office. Are you expecting to face more charges against Mr. Trump in the near future, and do you anticipate being part of that defense?
No, that's just political rhetoric, and I was hopeful that something would come out of this, that the political rhetoric would stop out of Washington, D.C., but I guess apparently it hasn't.
Were you, though, surprised to hear those words coming from the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate?
I'm not surprised to hear a politician say anything at all. No.
Well, throughout the trial, you denied that Mr. Trump had a role in inciting the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. You argued, first of all, that there was no insurrection, but during your closing arguments, you seemingly admitted that there was, in fact, an insurrection, using that word, saying that was not up for debate. What role did the former president play?
You didn't understand the case. I used the word
I'll give you the opportunity to clarify, sir.
Sure. I used the word insurrection in my closing argument when quoting the charging documents. What happened at the Capitol on January 6th is absolutely horrific. But what happened at the Capitol during this trial was not too far away from that. The prosecutors in this case doctored evidence. They did not investigate this case, and when they had to come to the court of the Senate to put their case on, because they hadn't done any investigation, they doctored evidence. It was absolutely shocking, I think, when we discovered it and we were able to expose it and put it out. I think it turned a lot of senators. The American people should not be putting up with this. They need to look at who these House managers were and look to see whether these are the folks they want representing them. It was shocking to me. Wouldn't have believed it.
Let's follow up with a point that you're making right now about the House managers, as you say, doctoring evidence, and the argument.
They didn't deny
for
it.
Our viewers,
they didn't deny it. I put it in front of them 3 times.
To be clear for our viewers, what you're talking about now is a check mark. That's a verification on Twitter that did not exist on that particular tweet. A 2020 that should have actually read 2021, and the selective editing, you say, of the tapes. Is that the doctored evidence of what you're speaking?
Wait, that's not enough for you? That's not enough for you?
Wait, no,
sir,
no. I'm trying. I am not a juror in this trial. What I'm trying to be clear for our viewers is what you're referring to, because not everybody has been following.
It's not okay.
Not everybody.
To doctor
sir,
a little bit of evidence.
Respectfully, I have not said it is. I have not said it is okay.
Ma'am, your question is.
I want to be clear for our viewers.
Listen, what has to happen is
viewers about what exactly you're saying when you say doctored evidence.
The media has to start telling the right story in this country. The media is trying to divide this country. You are bloodthirsty for ratings, and as such, you're asking questions now that are already set up with a fact pattern. I can't believe you would ask me a question indicating that it's all right just to doctor a little bit of evidence. There's more stuff that we uncovered that they doctored, to be frank with you, and perhaps that will come out one day. But we won this case, and I'm not a sore loser, but what happened, or a sore winner, I should say, but what should happen is somebody should look at the conduct of these House managers. It's unconscionable, aside from all of the due process violations that my client had. And the media should be looking at a square, straight way. The straight way. When I watch the news, I watch one station and it's raining. I watch another station at the same time and it's sunny. Your coverage is so slanted, it's got to stop. You guys have to stop and start reporting more like PBS does rather than a TV news show that doesn't have any journalistic integrity at all. What I'm telling you is that they doctored evidence. And I believe your question says, well, it's only a Twitter check and changing a year of a date here. They switched the date of a Twitter a year to try to connect it to this case. That's not a small thing, ma'am. The other thing they did is they put a check mark on something to make it look like it was a validated account when it wasn't. And when they were caught, they didn't say anything about it. They didn't even try to come up with an excuse about it. And that's not the way our prosecutors or our government officials should be conducting themselves. And the media shouldn't be letting them get away with it either. I'm tired of the biased media on both sides, left and right. What this country wants, what this country needs, is this country to come together, to take the left and the right and find a middle ground and start responsibly being our public officials, our elected officials. And one of the reasons why they do it is because of the media, because the media wants to tell their narrative rather than just telling it like it is. And frankly, I'm tired of it. I'm not a media. I'm not in front of your cameras all the time. But what I've been subjected to this last week.
I understand, and I've given you the opportunity.
You don't want to hear the truth. Yeah. Okay.
I've given you the opportunity. I will remind you that what I said was that for our viewers who have not been
heard what you said.
following all of the hours of this trial, to be clear about what you are speaking about. And I understand
I'm speaking
that you
about
seem
the House
very
manager's
upset.
failure to prove their case. That's what I'm telling
And
you. They
have
weren't able to
won
prove their
the
case.
acquittal. You have won the acquittal of your client.
Yes,
and if you'd
I
like
did.
to continue to talk about this conversation, we can have that discussion.
I don't need to.
But for me to ask a question, to clarify for our viewers,
a slanted question that was set up to say it's okay for them to cheat. That was your question. Isn't it okay for them to cheat?
I didn't say
It's just
that.
a little bit. You said, to be fair, it was
It's
only
fine.
a check
I
on the
understand.
Twitter.
You're not-
That's what you said. You got to live by your words. That's the problem. The media has to start living by the truth and not try to create a narrative.
Michael Vanderveen,
Yep.
thank you for joining us. I do appreciate.
Yep.
Okay. I see you taking off your microphone now. That was President Trump's defense attorney, Michael Vanderveen.
Bring you back to the president's speech at the State Department last week.
Sure.
He talked about a summit of democracy early in his administration to defend democracy globally. When will this happen? Like early, what does early mean, and what form would it take? How do you defend democracy?
What form will the summit take?
Yes, what form the summit would take, but how would you do this? Yes, first, what form the summit will take, and how do you defend democracy otherwise than sending the message that you want to defend democracy?
Well, if it's anytime soon, I suspect it will be a remote summit, but I don't have a date for you or a format of what that summit will look like. Certainly understand your interest, but we don't have any more specifics at this point in time.
Other topic, when you talk, it's a bit of follow-up about global posture review, led by Secretary Austin, so that the military footprint will be aligned with the foreign policy. Does the president want to bring back troops, the troops? As simple as that. Does he want to bring back the troops?
Are you referring to in Afghanistan? Or where? In the
Everywhere.
world?
Yes, in the world. Does he want to bring back the troops? Like the previous administration kept insisting, President Trump kept insisting on, I want to bring back the troops. Does President Biden want to do the same?
Look, I think the president looks at our engagement in the world through each circumstance, and certainly there are troops serving around the world in different capacities. He spoke about his commitment as it relates to Afghanistan on the campaign trail, but I don't think I can give you or I don't think it would be responsible to give you a sweeping point on that particular question. Go ahead.
President Biden now getting tough on China after really downplaying the China threat back in 2019. Remember this, please? Roll it.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. We don't get moving, they're gonna eat our lunch.
I mean, the same expression. Come on, man. They're going to eat our lunch. That gentleman is Rick Grenell, former acting National Intelligence Director. Obvious question. Is China going to eat our lunch with President Biden in the White House?
Well, let's hope not. I think that he's had a total change of heart, at least in his messaging lately. And that's largely because they're reading the current intelligence and they're seeing exactly what has happened over the last several years, where many Democrats have been hyping this Russian narrative, overhyping, I should say. And that's exactly what the Chinese want. It's the Beijing line to say, look over there at Russia. Well, they have been leveraging our local politicians, using the COVID-19 crisis and pandemic to really push forward their agenda. And I think that people like Jake Sullivan and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who's now getting foreign policy tutoring from the Secretary of State, they're all seeing the evidence and seeing that they've got to catch up on China compared to what they've been saying over the last several years.
You can't catch up with China unless you institute some of the hardline policies from President Trump's era. Can you?
We have a bipartisan push that New York Governor Andrew Cuomo stepped down. Growing calls from lawmakers that he be impeached, that he resign, be stripped of his emergency powers, and potentially be even criminally prosecuted for that stunning and possibly criminal abuse of power. The cover-up of COVID-19 nursing home deaths. Let's listen to Governor Cuomo earlier this year.
Whether a person died in a hospital or died in a nursing home, it's the people died. People died. But who cares? 33, 28, died in a hospital, died in a nursing home. They died.
The frequency with which House managers relied on unproven media reports shocked me as I sat in this chamber and listened to this.
And there's a lot that we don't know yet about what happened that day.
According to those around him at the time, reportedly responded.
Trump reportedly
reports across all major media outlets.
Major news networks, including Fox News, reportedly summoned. Reportedly not accidental. According to reports, President Trump who reportedly spoke to the guard.
And was widely reported.
Media reports?
According to reports, reportedly.
As any trial lawyer will tell you, reportedly is a euphemism for I have no real evidence. Reportedly is not the standard in any American setting in which any semblance of due process is afforded an accused. Reportedly isn't even, here is some circumstantial evidence. It is exactly as reliable as, I Googled this for you. And if you're worried that you might ever be tried based on this type of evidence, don't be. You get more due process than this when you fight a parking ticket. One reason due process is so important with respect to evidence offered against an accused is that it requires an opportunity to test the integrity, the credibility, the reliability of the evidence. Here, of course, former President Trump was completely denied any such opportunity. And it turns out there is significant reason to doubt the evidence the House.
I want to say this for Donald Trump, who I may well be voting to impeach.
Donald Trump has already done a number of things which legitimately raise the question of impeachment.
I don't respect this president, and I will fight every day until he is impeached.
That is grounds to start impeachment proceedings. Those are grounds to start impeachment. Those are grounds to start impeachment proceedings. Yes, I think that's grounds to start impeachment proceedings.
I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to call for the impeachment of the President of the United States of America.
I continue to say, impeach him! Impeach 45! Impeach 45!
So we're calling upon the House to begin impeachment hearings immediately.
On the impeachment of Donald Trump, would you vote yes or no?
I would vote yes.
I would vote to impeach.
Because we're going to go in there, we're going to impeach the mother.
But the fact is, I introduced articles of impeachment in July of 2017.
If we don't impeach this president, he will get reelected.
My oath requires me to be for impeachment, have an impeachment hearing. He needs the scarlet eye on his chest.
The representatives should begin impeachment proceedings against this president.
It is time to bring impeachment charges against him. Bring impeachment charges.
My personal view is that he richly deserves impeachment.
I'm here at an impeachment rally, and we are ready to impeach the...
Well, we can impeach him every day of the week for anything he does.
They're really showing themselves to do really well. Come on, man.
Should there be witnesses in your view, and who should they be?
Listen, I don't think witnesses are necessary. It's kind of a bizarre morning because it is chaos that has played out. We were coming into this morning and the Democratic senators had agreed witnesses were not needed. Everyone expected that we'd have closing arguments and a vote today. And then at the last minute, the House managers changed their mind and they decided they wanted to call a witness, Jessica Herrera Butler. I think what happened is leftist Twitter got really upset last night that they weren't calling witnesses. And I think the House, this is a political theater. And I think the House managers were feeling heat on their left flank, and so they decided they surprised Schumer and the Democrats by saying they wanted witnesses. At this point, nobody knows what's going to happen. I will say this. If we do call witnesses, it's not going to be one-sided. It's not going to be only the House managers get witnesses and President Trump doesn't get witnesses. And so if the House managers call Representative Herrera Butler, I think it is very likely that President Trump's lawyers will call Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is clearly a relevant witness to this matter. Speaker Pelosi can testify as to when she knew about the threats on the Capitol, what she knew specifically, and in particular, she can testify. We heard already that the House Sergeant at Arms turned down National Guard protection for the Capitol on January 6th because of, quote, the optics. And I think Speaker Pelosi can testify as to whether she made a decision based on optics, based on politics, not to have additional protection at the Capitol to prevent the terrorist attack that played out. My view remains we don't need witnesses, but I think if the Democrats want to open this Pandora's box, I don't think it's going to work out well for them.
President Trump himself be one of the witnesses if there are witnesses, and why not?
You know, there is a long tradition in our trials that is reflected in the Bill of Rights that any individual is not required to testify against themselves, to testify at their own trial. I don't think we should attempt to force the president to testify at his own impeachment trial. This is the House managers or the prosecutors. They have the burden of proof. They haven't proven their case. The reason you're seeing this Hail Mary is everybody knows the outcome of this proceeding, which is that President Trump is going to be acquitted. It takes 67 votes to convict. There aren't 67 votes, and those on the extreme far left are angry right now, and today is a reflection of that anger.
Do you think there are any minds that could be changed if witnesses are called?
Sure. I think where we are right now, I think we likely are about 55 votes to convict. I think all of the Democrats are likely to vote to convict. By the way, I think all the Democrats were going to vote to convict on day one. All of the Democrats were going to vote to convict in 2017. Many of these Democrats went on record as Trump was being sworn into president, saying they wanted to impeach him. So I think on the Democratic side, it's purely political. I think on the Republican side, we've seen 5 Republicans who voted with the Democrats on a couple of procedural motions. I think there's a reasonable possibility those 5 vote to convict. I'd say there are 55 votes to convict, plus or minus 2. I think we could probably see a low of 53 and a high of 57. Neither of those are remotely close to the 67 it takes to convict.
And is it a vote on every single witness, or just a resolution with an infinite number of amendments? What's your sense?
Well, under the rules, as I understand it, it's a vote on each witness. And so I think Schumer right now is dealing with chaos, doesn't know what to do because they hadn't planned on this. This was supposed to be, last night everyone went to bed being told this was going to be a unanimous consent that everyone agreed to, that we wouldn't have witnesses. And then it was this morning, it erupted into chaos. I'm hearing from multiple senators that the Democratic senators don't want witnesses. And by the way, if we go down the road of witnesses, this impeachment trial could last all of February, all of March, all of April. I got to tell you, I just came from the Republican cloakroom. There are a lot of Republican senators that are saying, all right, fine, if you want to drag this out, every day we're in this trial is a day that the Democratic majorities are not destroying the country, are not passing policies that are killing jobs and putting people out of work and keeping kids out of school. I think Schumer is trying desperately to get out of this this dead end into which they've driven themselves. Well, look, there are considerable discussions about that. Under the rules, impeachment is supposed to set aside all other business pending before the Senate. Look, my view from the beginning, I don't think Joe Biden wanted to go down the road of impeachment. I don't think Schumer and most of the Democratic senators wanted to go down the road of impeachment. The reason we're here is the hard left hates Donald Trump, and the House Democrats, they really reflect that hard partisan left. They drove the impeachment. I think Schumer felt he couldn't tell his base no, especially when he's afraid of being primaried from the left in New York. But I think Senate Democrats, they just got committee gavels. They just became chairman. They want to be taking up legislation, moving nominees. I think Senate Democrats are really frustrated right now. We may see a resolution. There are negotiations going on right now that we could see this thing resolved and ended today. I got to say, on the Republican side, I think we're fine however it plays out. I will say this, the outcome that would not be acceptable is for Senate Democrats to say we're going to let the House managers call witnesses, but President Trump's lawyers can't call any witnesses. And look, to be clear, I think it is unlikely that Republicans would vote for only Democratic witnesses and no witnesses for President Trump. I think the Republicans who supported the Democrats on other procedural matters would not support them on a one-sided biased trial, which means if it's a pure party line vote, 50-50, and they have to bring Kamala Harris in to break the tie, I think the whole country would look at a wildly unfair and biased trial. There are many aspects of this trial that ignore even the faintest hint of due process, and I think having a party line vote that says only Democrats get to call witnesses and the defendant in the proceeding doesn't get to call any witnesses, I don't think that passes the laugh test. I think you might even see some Democratic senators say, look, this is ridiculous. If one side gets to call a witness, the other side does. So I don't think we'll go down that road because it's so obviously unfair. But at this point, it's pandemonium.
Do you find Congresswoman Butler's statement to be credible about the Constitution?
I have no idea. I mean, at this point, it's hearsay or even double hearsay. I've spent a lot of my career as a practicing lawyer. I can tell you in any court in America, if you have a witness who gets up, who begins their testimony with, well, I don't know, but I heard a guy who told me, that witness gets laughed out of court. That doesn't get allowed in any ordinary circumstance. The entire House manager's case is based on hearsay and double hearsay and someone told someone. None of that is credible and reliable. I actually thought the president's defense lawyers did a very effective job with their montage of all the times the House managers said, well, this has been reported, that's been reported. With all due respect to our good folks in the press, the fact that it gets reported in some story does not establish it as a fact that is considered proven in anything resembling a court of law. And at this point, that's the entire basis of the manager's case. All right, thank you, guys.
This trial, in the final analysis, is not about Donald Trump. The country and the world know who Donald Trump is. This trial is about who we are.
As we have shown, Democrats were obsessed with impeaching Mr. Trump from the very beginning of his term. The House Democrats tried to impeach him in his first year. They tried to impeach him in his second year. They did impeach him in his third year, and they impeached him again in his fourth year. And now they have conducted a phony impeachment show trial when he is a private citizen out of office.
The yeas are 57. The nays are 43. Two-thirds of the senators present not having voted guilty. The Senate judges that the respondent, Donald John Trump, former President of the United States, is not guilty as charged in the article of impeachment. The presiding officer directs judgment to be entered in accordance with the judgment of the Senate as follows. The Senate, having tried Donald John Trump, former President of the United States, upon one article of impeachment exhibited against him by the House representatives, and two-thirds of the senators present not having found him guilty of the charge contained therein, it is therefore ordered and adjudged that the said Donald John Trump be, and he is hereby acquitted of the charge in said article.
The vast majority of the Senate Republican caucus, including the Republican leader, voted to acquit former President Trump, signing their names in the columns of history alongside his name forever. January 6th will live as a day of infamy in the history of the United States of America. The failure to convict Donald Trump will live as a vote of infamy in the history of the United States Senate. This trial wasn't about choosing country over party, even not that. This was about choosing country over Donald Trump, and 43 Republican members chose Trump. They chose Trump.
There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it. The people who stormed this building believed they were acting on the wishes and instructions of their president. We have no power to convict and disqualify a former office holder who is now a private citizen.
Let's bring in ABC's senior national correspondent, Terry Moran. And Terry, former President Trump is responding tonight. We haven't seen him publicly since January 20th, the inauguration, and this is his first reaction to the trial.
It is, Whit, and it will come as no surprise that former President Trump, has no expression of remorse or regret at all. As you pointed out, he calls the impeachment another phase of the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country. And then he looks ahead in this statement. He says that the Make America Great Again movement has only just begun, and I look forward to continuing our incredible journey together in the months ahead. And so he sounds not just undaunted, but triumphant.
And Terry, we've also witnessed the bitter division within the Republican Party over this impeachment. Where does the GOP go from here?
No one knows, Whit. Right now, it looks like Mitch McConnell and other Republicans are trying to drive Donald Trump out of the party, not by voting to convict him, but by essentially accusing him, holding him accountable for the riot, and almost inviting local prosecutors to do their work for him. But Donald Trump clearly is going nowhere, and you can't name another Republican with greater name recognition, ability to raise money, dominate news cycles, or generate big crowds. I think we all know Donald Trump. He'll be back. Whit?
All right, Terry Moran on this historic night in Washington. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to...
We begin with the historic end to the second impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump, this time accused of incitement of insurrection after the violent assault on the Capitol. Tonight, the Senate has acquitted the former president by a vote of 57 to 43, 7 Republicans joining every Democrat in voting guilty, but falling short of the 2/3 majority required to convict. The vote after a dramatic twist, the House managers acting as prosecutors, moving to call a witness about a heated phone call between Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and the former president during the siege. Mr. Trump reportedly refusing to tell the rioters to stand down. The president's lawyers expressing outrage at the move. An advisor to the former president saying if there would be witnesses, their side would call more than 300. Then a compromise. A statement from a representative about that phone call in question would be added to the record. Donald Trump immediately issuing a statement after the verdict, calling impeachment yet another phase of the greatest witch hunt in the history of the country, saying his movement has only just begun. But then Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell unleashed a blistering attack on the man he just voted to acquit. ABC's congressional correspondent Rachel Scott leads us off.
On day 5 of his impeachment trial, former President Donald Trump acquitted for the second time by the Senate.
Senators, how say you?
On the charge of incitement of insurrection, the majority of senators, all of the Democrats.
Mr. Burr. Mr. Burr. Guilty.
And 7 Republicans finding Trump guilty, but still falling short of the 2/3 necessary to convict.
He is hereby acquitted of the charge in said article.
Before the vote, some last-minute drama in the chamber. Lead House impeachment manager Jamie Raskin saying Republican Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler must be subpoenaed to testify.
Needless to say, this is an additional critical piece of corroborating evidence.
It came after news reports overnight about that heated phone call between Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and former President Donald Trump in the middle of the riot. Herrera Butler saying McCarthy told her it was a shouting match. McCarthy pleading with Trump to tell his supporters to stand down, saying, quote, "You got to hold them. You need to get on TV right now. You need to get on Twitter. You need to call these people off." Trump responding, "Kevin, they're not my people." McCarthy then saying this, quote, "Yes, they are. They just came through my windows and my staff is running for cover. Yeah, they're your people. Call them off." The former president telling McCarthy, quote, "Well, I guess these people are just more angry about the election and upset than you are." That afternoon, McCarthy had told ABC News about his attempts to get through to Trump.
As I was stuck within my room, I called the president, explained to him what was going on.
The House manager saying this account is so damning, Herrera Butler must testify and share her account of that conversation. Trump's defense team objecting strongly, claiming they were blindsided.
I think that's inappropriate and improper. We should close this case out today.
The clerk will call the roll.
The majority of senators,
Ms. Murkowski. Mr. Romney.
including 5 Republicans, voting to call witnesses, hear depositions, see more evidence. But the defense team erupting, banging fists on the table. There was confusion in the chamber. Senator Ron Johnson telling colleagues this should have been over by now. Then Senator Lindsey Graham.
I'd like to change my vote to aye.
Threatening to extend the trial even further, tweeting, "If the body wants witnesses, I'm going to insist we have multiple witnesses." After debate, an abrupt change. there would actually be no witnesses. Neither side wanting a lengthy trial. Both sides agreeing instead to omit a statement from Herrera Butler into evidence where she laid out that conversation. And then Democrats move forward with their closing arguments, making this impassioned plea.
Senators, this cannot be the beginning. It can't be the new normal. It has to be the end. And that decision is in your hands.
But by the end of the day, it made no difference. The outcome, what most Republicans predicted from the outset, acquittal.
This has been perhaps the most unfair and flagrantly unconstitutional proceeding in the history of the United States Senate.
And after it was all over, perhaps the most forceful condemnation of Trump came not from Democrats, but from Republican leader Mitch McConnell.
There's no question. None.
What is the news? What is the news? Thanks for watching. Wala, nanonood lang ako habang naghihintay ng bibisita. Ikaw, anong balita? Long time no see. Respond ka. Para at least nanonood ako ng ng impeachment ni Donald Trump. Ngayon lang ako nanonood. I heard kasi na siya na-quit. So I was so what do I call it, intrigued kung bakit yung naging trial. So very very interesting, Karamihan ng napapanood kong video like ABC and whatsoever, they really applauded the what I call this, yung lawyer ni Donald Trump, ni President Trump. They said that he did really good. Parang happy ka may na-acquit. Of course. Of course. Ikaw naman syempre, 'di ba? I'm a President Trump supporter. Maski anong sabihin nila, syempre, we're not going down to their level na makipag what I call this, argue with them. Kasi, ang rhetoric nila is the same thing, kung you go down to their level, parang isa ka na rin sa kanila, di ba? So ako, okay lang ako, calm lang. I just watched the news about this acquittal niya. And so far, very powerful yung defense lawyer ni President Trump. Very, very inspiring actually. Pagsalita niya, sa pag-defense niya, talagang may matututunan ka na puro lang hearsay ang mga evidences na ginamit sa kanya. At the end, syempre, hindi pa rin nag-succeed yung Senate hearing. So hindi pa rin hindi pa rin siya impeach. So, makakapag pa rin. He's still able to run for president in 2024. Trump's lawyer, Michael Van Der Veen, is the best. Watch all his arguments and video presentations. Swak na swak. Yeah, hindi pa ako matapos na every time panonoodin ko, meron na naman na parang, wow, gusto kong ang galing ng pagkakapresent nila. Talagang kakaiba ang presentation nila. Unlike doon yung mga nag-prosecute sa kanya, yung lawyer doon sa prosecution panel, parang minadali at saka hindi nila pinag-preparean talaga. Ibig sabihin, ito lang yung mga collectives siguro sa Congress na parang nagbuo sila ng committee for impeachment. So hindi nila talaga pinag-aralan. Kumbaga, siguro na pressure sila ng ni Pelosi, from the very beginning naman hate na ni Pelosi si Trump. Sabi niya nga from the very start na nag-campaign pa lang si Trump, she hated it already. Sabi niya first day talaga impeach na daw. Ayun, 'di ba? May counter-attack sila. Well, anong counter-attack nila? Nasabi about sa something about the law? Hindi naman mangyayari yun dahil it will go back again sa Supreme Court. Alam mo naman sa Supreme Court, di ba? They have to gather first the evidence of everything. tatapos lang yung ni Biden, hindi pa rin mausad-usad yung because they don't have enough evidence. At the same time, puro hearsay. So, yun lang napansin ko sa mga nila. Di ba? Puro lang naman ang ginagawa nila is against kay Donald Trump. It just happened na matalino si Trump. He knows how he moves. He knows where he's positioning himself. Talagang very smart siya sa mga moves na ginagawa niya. It just happened na nadenggoy lang siya ni Biden dahil nadaya siya dahil dyan sa voting machine na yan. So talagang they already planned. But never mo nang narinig yan si Trump na magsalita, di ba, in the public. Or it's either na they don't want to hear his voice because talaga makaka-attract talaga siya ng maraming tao. Kaya hindi nila pinapakita yung mga interview or whatsoever. Or it's either na ayaw humarap ni Trump sa camera. I mean that Trump's lawyers magaling ang counter-attack nila sa liar. Yeah, totoo. Di ba pinakita nila yung mga videos nila? Nakakatuwa nga eh. Sabi ko, wow, I didn't realize that nagumpisa pala sila na pabagsakin si Trump from the very beginning na na-elect siya eh. Puro impeach. Hanggang natapos ang terms niya, impeach. So it's nothing to do about the Democrats. It's about personal because they know Trump don't go down with their shit. Dahil alam ni Trump, they're going to call them out na pag mali ang ginawa nila, talagang ayaw ni Trump. So siguro, they felt na hindi nila ma-move yung mga agendas nila dahil hinaharang ni Trump. Dahil Trump wants for the benefit ng mga American, not for their political ambition or career. Yan ang mga politician eh. Alam mo, I'm watching this, I'm learning something new na it's all about politics. It's all about their party, not for the people of America. It's so sad. Kaya, never akong boboto sa mga Democrats na yan, puro mga halang ang kaluluwa. Mag-log in ka sa StreamYard para invite mo ako sa live video mo para maka-join. Mag-log in ka sa StreamYard para ma-invite mo ako. Pwede naman kita ma-invite eh. No, invite kita. Okay. Saan ba dito? Alam ko meron ako dito eh. Saan ba yung ko? Okay. Dito. Ayan. Ibibigay ko sa iyo yung link. Copy ang link. Ko sa iyo. Ayan. Kaya mo bang i-click mo siya kung makapasok ka. I-click mo yan para makapagkwentuhan tayo. Kasi kasama, para ma-interview kita eh. Yan. Guests can join us using the link below. Could you please click that one? And then let me know para magkwentuhan tayo. Yan. Kasi meron tong meron tong option ng in his StreamYard, ang ginagamit ko rito is eCam. Okay, hanap nga tayo ng impeachment. Yan. Sige, ka. Yan. Teka, puta. Careful ka kasi baka ma-vandalize ang house mo. Hindi naman. Wala naman wala namang tawag nito. Wala naman akong pinopost na kung I just talk something. Ang mahirap niyan kung nagpo-post ka ng video, 'di ba? Yan ang kumbaga parang we're talking about the impeachment, 'di ba? So, wala naman tayong inaapakan. Wala naman tayong pinapangalan ng mga tao. Ang pinapangalanan natin is si President Trump. And I'm a big supporter of President Trump. And I don't care with other, politician. Basta I do believe na pag tama, sinusuportahan ko. Yun lang. Diba? Wala naman akong any other agendas. Yan. So, let's post a topic right here. Okay. And then, alam mo na, they don't care or air. Basta ang mahalaga is we're just talking about, let's talk about the impeachment trial. Oh, okay. Okay. Let's talk about the impeachment trial. Saan ka na ba? Ha? Lagay ko nga tong gray. And then yung text niya is, text niya is maybe, let's say red. Saan ka na ba? Ha? Okay, what's this? Okay, what's time New Roman LMN OPQRST. Yan. Saan ka na ba, Mikey? Mikey. Alam mo naman. Okay, Mikey, nasaan ka na? Ba't di ka nagpapakita? Okay. Naku, baka ma-spam tayo sa salita mo yan. Baka maano tayo. Ayan, ilagay natin siya dyan. I-center natin siya. Tama ba yan? Naka-center siya. Ha? Naka-center na ba siya? Ha? Mikey. Nasaan ka na? Ayan, binigay ko na sa yung link eh. Let's talk about the impeachment trial. Ha? Mikey! Okay. Ano ko siya? I-tag to. Okay. Let's talk about the impeachment trial of former President Donald J. Trump. Okay, there you go. Yan. Lagay lang natin dito sa baba. Dito na lang. Yan. I think that is okay na. Or maybe just this on this side. Yan, para para at least medyo okay. Hindi ko pa alam kung saan ko ilagay. I think that's yan. Mikey, nasaan ka na? Where are you, Mikey? Where are you, Mikey? Or where are you? Passion fits. Just click the link above to join. Ayan, nilagyan na kita ng jacket para makapag-ano ka. Nasaan ka na ba? Yan. Anyway, wala ka pa naman, manood muna ako. Okay. Kakatuwa kasi manood eh. Ganda ng mga ano nila, arguments. Okay. Kaya lang walang Yung iba wala silang ano. Ito.
Good evening, and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. I'm your host and human white claw, Tucker Carlson. There's a lot to cover tonight, including the impeachment. So in place of my usual monologue, here's a loose collection of scaremongering non sequiturs. Is AOC hiding in your house right now? Wouldn't put it past her. Pronouns for dogs? Come on, everybody knows they're boys. Pixar. Is it making our kids depressed or gay? Pick one. Well, the impeachment has reached its foregone conclusion with the acquittal of Donald J. Trump. And tonight's first guest is a power player in those hearings. Please welcome 65-year-old teacher's pet, Senator Lindsey Graham.
Thank you. Thank you, Tucker. It's a great day for 30% of America, and tonight, we party.
Wow. Well, Lindsey, you're obviously very happy about the verdict.
Look, Tucker, this trial was offensive and absurd. Like a freaking episode of Rick and Morty. Excuse my foul language. But we all agree the attack on the Capitol was a horrible thing. But just because the rioters were yelling "Fight for Trump" doesn't mean they meant Donald Trump. Could have been some real Tiffany heads. Maybe even some Eric stands. I don't know. But regardless, the trial is over, and now we can move past this and focus on the serious issues. That's locking up Hillary and freeing beautiful Britney Spears.
That's a great point, Lindsey. It really makes me contort my...
Ano na yan? Ano na yan? Ha? What is that? What is that? Passion feeds. Yung binigay ko sa yung link, ayan, you have to click that one. Okay, you have to click that link. Ano? You have to click it. I already gave you that. Cute yan, yung hindi pa uso ang kanin. Binigay ko diba yan? I-click mo yan para mag-usap tayo. Yan, para guest kita. Kunwari, para lumabas ka sa sa video rin. Parang yan parang tayo, discussion, di ba? Parang discussion din. I-click mo yan para may admit kita as one of my, guest. Kasi merong merong feature ang ICAM na guest. So, kailangan guest kita. Okay? So, mag-ano ka na kasi. Ayan. Ako yan. Anong i-video? Hindi nga po pwede. Kailangan na pumasok ka sa ko na i-guest kita. Kaya nga ayaw mo pang pasok ka na. Guest kita. O, dali. Ba't ayaw pang Dali. Kinlik na nga kita. Wala ka pang Ha? I-click mo na. Kinlik mo na ba? Ha? You have 20 hours of interview time remaining. Ha? Bakit wala ka? Ito, play mo lang video ko. Paano ko i-play yan? I-play ko. O, ayan, i-play ko. Ay! Ano pa siya? I-play ko na. Okay lang, 2021 o January 19. O, ayan, naka-play na. Oy, wag niyang kalimutan mag-sub kay ha. Kay Mikey. Yan. O, diba? Ayaw sa Samsung na phone. Ba't ayaw? All you have to do, I think, mag-computer ka kasi para ma-accept mo. Ayan, piniplay ko na yung video mo. Oh. Alam mo, bumalik ka sa dati mong, lawas na ganyan, Mikey. Para hot na hot ka pa. Diba? Kaya yan i-achieve. Right? So, ibalik na kasi ang dating, what do you call this? Ang dating alindog. Diba? Kailangan ibalik. Si Mikey. Oh. Dapat kasi bumalik na sa dating na gano'n. Kasi pag hindi binalik mahirap. So ibalik na, 'di ba? Oh. Balik na tayo doon sa ano pang hindi ka ba gumagamit ng laptop o kaya desktop para makasama ka sa Ha? Mikey. Hindi ka pala Kala ko hindi pinapaakyat dapat kita rito para magdiskusyon tayo Type ka lang dyan ng type dong. Sige, mag-iPad ako. Yeah, mag-iPad ka kasi. iPad ka, okay? And then, i-click mo yung link na binigay ko, ha? Ayan, i-click mo to. I-click mo yan. Click mo. Okay? Para let's check, para makapagkwentuhan tayong dalawa hanggang Tapos i-share mo rin sa mo kasi sa sa screen mo. I-share mo para may makapanood din, di ba? Oh, panood kayo. I-live stream mo rin. Di ba? Yun, nakakatuwa. Panoorin naman yung yung video mong yun na sabi ko parang mga 3 or 5 years ago. Batang-bata pa at saka ang fit na fit pa at saka medyo payat pa. Ngayon medyo nadagdagan. Ganun talaga siguro pag napapasarap sa pagkain Nakakalimutan ng ang katawan. Same thing with me. Ay, ayun. O, ayan. Ilagay na kita rito. O, ayan. O, diba? So, natin. Dalawahan. Hi. Oo, diba? Magsalita. Ayan.
Marinig ako?
Oo, naririnig ka dong.
Oh, shit, it's so hot in here.
Ayan. Diba?
Nag-yoga kasi ako.
Add to the right.
Add to lose weight.
Add kita sa left. Ayan, nandiyan ka. O, di ba? O, anong pagkwentuhan natin? Ano pala, kumusta yung yung sa Binibining Pilipinas?
Ay, hindi ko alam. Wala ko na Rabia lang inaabangan ko.
Ay, Rabia. Pero may interview daw siya na ginawa ng Mississology. Tapos, they said na iba daw yung pag nagsasalita siya, may substance siya. Hindi daw yung katulad ng iba na former queen na memorize daw ang sinasabi. Sabi ko,
Ay, oo. Coming from the heart talaga yun.
Yeah.
Parang si Pia ba?
Yeah. Pero hindi ka ba fan ni Catriona Gray?
Nanalo siya. Yeah, patriotic ako but not really fan.
hindi ka fan ni
hindi ako
Catriona.
Okay. Parang nasa-stuck dyan sa akin si Pia talaga.
Yeah, pag nagsalita kasi si Pia talagang hindi parang rehearse, parang mag-anticipate ka kung ano sasabihin. At saka
kasi yung mga tipong mga Catriona kasi mga parang umuwi lang sa Pilipinas to get a crown, title, to represent ang country. Parang hindi basta hindi ko ma-feel. Pero I'm proud na nanalo tayo representing the Philippines. Pero iba yung lumaki talaga sa atin.
Yeah. At nakikita mo yung hugot. Diba? May nakikita kang hugot. I don't know,
Yes.
parang ito to be honest parang hindi ako big fan ni Rabia. Hindi ako big fan siya. Oo, I'm proud na magre-represent siya ng Philippines sa Miss Universe. Pero parang I don't know ito opinion ko lang naman 'to. Hindi naman ibig sabihin na I'm not supporting him. Parang sa akin parang wala doon yung hinahanap na Miss Universe na parang hindi siya parang kung iano mo sa standard ni Catriona, parang hindi siya close. Hindi siya close.
Oo, taas ang standard.
Yeah. Kung yun lang sa akin pero I'm sure makapasok siya sa semifinals.
Ang ano kasi is like, if first time kasi ni Rabia mag-join ng national pageant, compared mo naman kay Tia tsaka Catriona, na-expose na sila. So para kumbaga, we got the chance na to know them. Compared ni Rabia na ganito, first time pa niya, tapos diretso ng ganito, salang. So, we still learn, learning something from her.
But do you know anything about her?
Oh, aside na taga siya, Visayas, Iloilo, na hindi ko na nga pinansin dati nung nanalo siya dati. Yung nag-sign up siya dati, hindi ko siya pinansin. Pero doon lang, nag-shine na lang siya bigla. Meron talagang ganun mag-shine ka na lang the moment na pageant night.
Well, to tell you honestly, I was, not broken-hearted but disappointed na hindi na nakapasok si even sa sa top, sa question and answer ba, si I forgot.
Bring it on.
No.
Bring it. Ayoko talaga sa kanya. Bring it. Kasi lemon.
Hindi yon si taga Davao.
Oo nga, Bisaya din. Basta, kilala ko,
her name.
short hair.
Dark hair, dark skin, at saka tall. Kasi na-meet ko siya dito sa LA. Siya?
Parang si Lani Misalot siya.
Parang siya, I forgot her name. Ano bang pa? Si
May
Inday.
dating talaga.
Si Inday.
Oo.
Maganda talaga siya, parang mala Venus Ra. Pag ilagay mo siya sa isang room na magkakasama mga puti, mga stand out siya.
Oo, matangkad
Makikita
pa
mo
na.
talaga siya. Hindi siya matatabunan. Nandoon yung Filipina beauty talaga.
Dinala pala siya na pumunta dito? Kailan yung nandito? Yung nag-represent si Kwan?
2018.
19 yun. 18 pala.
2018. Nung nagkaroon ng after party yung mga winners ng Miss Little Philippines.
Uy, taga Cebu yun.
Hindi, taga Davao siya. Taga Davao.
Nag-represent? You were talking about tumakbo nung kasabay ni Rabia?
Hindi.
O yung nag-represent?
Kasabay ni kasabay ni Rabia, taga Davao. Oo.
Pero akala ko, kaya nga nung pumunta nung 18, wala naman siguro siya. Yung nag-represent siguro ng Philippines, si pangalan nun.
Hindi, nag-represent din siya sa next Asian Top Model.
So okay, we're talking about the same person. Akala ko yung nag-represent talaga ng Philippines. Kailan mo siya na-meet? Nung 18? Nung
2018.
pumunta dito?
Dito, actually, pagkatapos siyang nanalo ng Asian Next Top Model, naglipad siya rito kasi I think they offer her like a photo shoot or a short gift.
Pero hindi nasabay ni Koan. Pangalan ng babae na yun. Sino yan? Taga Cebu.
I forgot her name. My gosh.
Hindi yung taga Cebu ba? Anong pangalan ng represent ng Philippines?
Yeah,
hindi yung
Chris
represent ng Philippines.
Sinasabi mo taga Cebu.
Sino nga yun? Yung maganda.
Matangkad siya. I forgot her name. Oh my gosh. Hanapin ko nga dito. Taga Davao. Okay. Hanapin ko sa natin. I-search ko siya. Davao.
Madali lang yan.
Yeah, I know. Miss...
Lagay mo top 10, top 20.
Miss Philippines 2020 ba siya? Davao City. Si Alaysa Malinaw.
Malinaw.
Yan, si Alaysa Malinaw.
Paano mo siya nakita? Kasabay siya nung pumunta dito nung nag-represent ng Miss Philippines sa Universe?
Hindi pa siya nag-represent nag-represent siya ng next Asia Top Model sa I think sa Thailand or sa somewhere sa Singapore.
Yeah, I'm talking about sino ang kasabay niya pumunta ditong beauty queen.
Ang
Kasi alam
kasabayan
ko,
niya sila siguro, sino ba yung during that time na 2018? Isn't it
2018,
si
si ano yun,
Rachel Peters?
17 si Peters,
O
o
yan,
18 si ko. 18 si Catriona naman. Si 19, yung taga Cebu.
sino yan?
Nagpa-picture ka nga eh. Yun ba, Agila yung ano niya, outfit niya?
Si hindi.
Nakakalito.
Nakalimutan, di ba? Kasi hindi, ano ba
Pero
to
top 20.
si Gazzini.
Oo, Gazzini.
Si
Akala ko
Gazzini
siyang
Ganados.
kasabay.
Si Gazzini Ganados naman, 2020 dumating dito. Yun naman si
19, uy, 2019.
2019 ba?
Oo, kasi 20 lockdown tayo.
2019. So 2018, so before sino yung 2017, 2016? Sino ang 2016 natin?
Peters. Si
16.
16. Dito, si Pia, tapos si Maxine.
Maxine. So before Maxine,
Pia.
si Pia.
Ah,
Ayan, si Pia, si Malinaw, magkakaano yan.
sabay.
Magkakaisang kampo yan. Sila pumunta dito, magkakasama yan. Kasi, paano ko na-meet siya, si Lurazon, ang photographer niya dati, si Heidi Abraham.
Yeah, remember.
Si Heidi at saka si Jonas Gapod, magkakaibigan yan. So every time pupunta dito si Gapod, nag-i-stay yan sa bahay ni Heidi for a few days. So pag pumunta yun, syempre kasama yung mga girls, yung mga Miss Universe Philippines na represent, nag-i-stay din sila doon for a few days, ganyan. So libre yung nila, yung accommodation. So siguro yung car na lang libre para makagala-gala sila sa dito sa rodeo, pa-picture sa Hollywood sign, mga ganyan. So they have somebody na sa kanila, magpi-pick up sa airport. Kaya
meron ako. Kilala ko yung sino ba yung
si Heidi.
yung mga kasama natin sa Vegas noon na naghiwalay na rin sila. Pero sila yung minsan nagpapatulog sa bahay nila, yung mga beauty queens.
Yeah, yung iba. Yeah, they do that para at least makatipid, pero yung pocket money nila, magamit nila. So, yun ang So, dinala ni kasi in-invite nila si Heidi. Kasi,
Lalo, Romy, malapit ka na sa airport dyan. Magpapatira ka na rin ng beauty queens dyan.
sana nga. But, iba na masyado ng pera-pera Pera-pera.
Hindi kasi yung karamihan lalo pag sa showbiz, may option kasi sila na to stay with their friends para yung budget ng mga producer hindi nila magamit sa hotel. So sa bahay na lang na ganun sila, diba? So yung mga beauty queens naman, wala silang option. Kung sponsored sila ni Madam, pwede na rin gamitin yung pera sa hotel or dun sa bahay. Pero sa may mag-offer lang naman, pero karamihan, kukunti lang naman mag-offer ng ganun.
Yeah.
Ako, I'm just proud na makapira sa bahay. Picture-picturean ko sila. Why not? Ida-drive ko sila. Why not?
Yeah, like si Gazzini, meron siyang kamag-anak. So, nakapag-stay siya. Tapos parang meron nag-sponsor yata na parang merong resort somewhere sa Lake Tahoe. Dinala siya doon. So, doon siya.
Kita ko. Doon yung mga pinsan niya.
Yeah, nag-skiing, gano'n. Marami siyang connection dito na mayayaman.
Ako, okay lang ako si Tony Labrusca, bahay ko sa isang ipatirahin ko.
May presyo yata yung kapatid. Basta kaya ng Bank of America. Go lang ng go.
Ay ko, sakit.
Hindi, dati daw taga Canada yata yun eh. I don't think so.
Hindi, taga US talaga yan.
Hindi, taga daw siya eh. Sabi niya, nagkwento siya sa Canada daw siya dati eh. Sabi
pero alam ko, mami niyan dito sa States.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Hindi ko pa na-meet.
Hindi kasi napanood ko yung mga bagong BL series sa YouTube nila. Ang ganda. Kulit talaga.
Ano yung BL na yan?
Bagay na bagay. BL kasi boy love. About, di ba sikat na sa Thailand yung mga ganyan. So, about story. Tapos gawa ang Philippines. Tingnan mo nga yung Hello Stranger nila from episode 1 to 8. Ang ganda talaga. As in, natural talaga si Tony mag-acting ng ganun ba.
Tagalog.
Tagalog siya, tapos nagsisingit din siya mag-English, pero yung mga kasama niya, Tagalog.
Mm.
It's about online kasi Romeo yung nag-ano sila. Kasi bawal lockdown dito, pero nakuha nila talaga yung concept about lockdown and the story of how Tony fell in love.
Ano bang
Kasama niya.
pinaka-plot? Anong plot ng mga ng mga
Lahat na, they're students, high school students. And
high school
then,
student? Hindi na siya mukhang high school
artista naman is pwede mo naman gawing So, yun, di ba?
Okay.
So, yung kasama niya, I don't know if, it's high school. Kasi may junior, sophomore, yung nila, role.
Mm.
So, but it looks like high school yung, concept. And then, kasi to si Tony, bulakbol, ganito. Tapos may nakilala silang nerd na cute na sabi ng teacher, kailangan turuan mo to si Tony na mag-kuan. Tapos ngayon, very sikat na sila ngayon as partner ng lalaki na yung pinakaguluhan na sila ngayon ba? Kasi maganda pagka-portray nila. Tapos Tony became successful sa pag-tutor siya nung kaklase niya with all the help of her friends. Tapos he fell in love with a boy. So, yun na.
So, yun ang istorya.
Istorya, ganda.
First time ko lang narinig yan. First time ko lang, siguro busy ako sa video.
Oo, September siya. September 2020. During lockdown.
Sikat ba siya sa Philippines?
Oo, sumikat siya dahil ito na movie. Na series online. Free yan ngayon. Nasa YouTube na ngayon. Free. So ngayon, ginawan sila ng movie. Blockbuster na rin ngayon kasi dami daw talaga bumili. Kasi from the series, na natapos na, people were really asking, I hope meron mang part 2. So, ginawa ng director, gumawa sila ng movie. Kahapon nag-premiere. So, papanoorin ko nga.
Di ba bawal gumawa ng movie? Paano nagawa nila paraan?
I don't know. Pwede na makagawa sila. Tingnan mo, may mga behind the scenes sila
Interesting.
Yung mga trailer. Basta tingnan mo lang Hello Stranger na
I will check
trailer.
Hello Stranger. Because I wasn't paying attention much kung ano nangyayari sa Philippines kasi puro na lang negative ang napapanood.
Oo, kaya nga ako rin nung mag-flash ko sa yung screen ka na parang recommendation. Tinay ko lang, ganda, tapos nagustuhan ko rin. I cried.
Hindi ka nanonood ng Korean novela?
Adik ako niyan talaga, pero lately, sakit na ng mata ko kaabang ng subtitles.
Talo ka ni Anape. Si Anape talagang die hard ang naabot ng mga araw. Talagang
kaya nga ako nag-surrender na ako, naghahanap na ako para Romeo ng movies na lang. Diretsohan na kasi mag-series ako. Unless kung mga sila Chi Wang-kok, yung mga bida kasi gwapong-gwapo talaga.
Di ba naman yan?
Crash
Landing. Pag meron kang account, dire-diretso yung series. You don't have to wait for something.
Kaya nga, the problem is, my eyes is tired of, eyes are just tired of reading the subtitles na. Kaya ngayon, nahanap ko sa Netflix is, movies lang. Kung may Korean man, at least movie, isang oras lang. Kasi,
ayan, dami nang nahuhumaling sa Korean novela As a matter of fact, lahat sa Facebook.
Oo, grabe ako sa idols, nag-comment ako sa inyo ng K-pop idols BTS talaga ako, grabe.
Yan yung sa household namin, si Sister Jane, Sister, Des, pati si Anna, they can go all night long talking about Korean novela, yung mga crushes nila, mga,
Sila,
hindi ako makarelate. Kasi
Yun Bin.
Yeah, I don't really care for Korean something.
Ako grabe. So mga gwapo lang naman ako. Pero yung group BTS na idol, yung boy band. Sila yung sikat talaga, yung Blackpink. Sa sumusunod na sumabaybay ako, may time ako manood nila.
yung mga girls ko naman, they love Blackpink.
Blackpink, ganda, no? I'm sure they can dance the songs, no?
Yeah, they dance.
Oh my God, imagine ko lang yung Blackpink in your area.
Mga taga saan ba sila?
Actually, yung isa taga Thailand talaga. Super galing
Korean.
niya kasi kinuha siya. Hold on na. Atching up.
Bless you. Ano siya? Korean o Thai?
Thai siya.
Ah.
Tapos yung dalawa, they were born in Korea. Pero, or either way, ni-raise sila doon sa New Zealand. Ang isa naman is Australia. Pero Korean sila. So they know how to speak English.
But
Yung
I heard
isa,
there is one from the US.
wala.
Wala.
Taga ano yun, Australia at saka
Yung
New
kamukha
Zealand.
ni Lisa Soberano.
Lisa Soberano is yung si ano yun taga New Zealand siya.
Taga New Zealand.
Yung isa, Australia. Tapos yung isa, si Lisa, taga Thailand. Si Jisoo, yun ang pure talagang lumaki sa sa Korea na she doesn't know how to speak English. So, yun. Yung dalawa, kaya sikat na sila ngayon.
Ano ba sikat na kanta nila? Sila ba yung kumata ng...
Do. Hate you with that. Kwan. How you like that? How you like that?
Yeah. Familiar na.
Do.
Yung isa naman yung yung Nobody But You, hindi yun hindi yung
Wonderland, yung panahon pa ni Kopong yun. 2009 pa yun.
2009. So wala na yun. May mga apo na
Wala
yun.
na sila, matanda na rin sila, pero ang latest naman bagay, ang sumunod sa kanila is yung tawag na Wonder Girls sila noon, tawag. Ngayon kasi pumalit na Momoland.
Momoland. Yung Momoland.
Yung Nobody But You, Wonder Girls yun eh. Yung Momoland, yung Bam Bam. Basta. Tapos Twice. Marami sila. Nakakatuwa kasi Romeo, makita mo dyan sa Random K-pop in the Philippines. Nako, papatugtog nila lahat, K-pop talaga sa isang school. And then, pagpatugtog na in 3, 2, 1, patugtog nila Blackpink, takbuhan kagad ang mga students. Imagine mo, for 30 songs or 50 songs pinapatugtog for about 30 seconds na song. Alam lahat ng students. So that means to say, when they go home, they also study their dances. We are
bakit
influenced by Koreans.
Influenced din ba, Mikey, kaya ang dami mga Becky sa atin?
Siguro, ang dami Becky sa Thailand naman yun.
No,
Lately lang itong K-pop.
Sa atin, di ba? Na parang tumaas ang trend, di ba?
Yes, because of sa K-pop. Bago lang ang K-pop, pero Thailand talaga sa atin ang Kasi tingnan mo yung boy love story about ang Thailand, gabi napapasikat niyan. Kaya nga gumawa ang Philippines, sumikat naman ang Philippines.
So naging market na nila. From what I've heard is tsaka na I know na yung mga na mga Pilipinas, yung mga telenovela nila, talagang binibenta sa Thailand, sa Malaysia, sa Indonesia.
Kaya gumagawa na sila ng ngayon, subtitles.
Yeah. Very popular.
Ito nga sinasabi ko si Hello Stranger. Napakasikat talaga, grabe. Every episode is like may millions silang viewers.
Yeah, I know na napakasikat ng mga TV series sa atin. Pero that's before nung okay yung ABS-CBN. Ngayon wala na. So parang I think
pero alam mo yung bago ngayon kung online lang sila. Online na lang ginagawa nila ngayon. Kahit na ewan ko, pero studio pa rin sila, but ewan ko ba't nina-allow pa rin lang sila gumagala ng gano'n. Di ba kayong mga showtime meron pa din?
Yeah.
So, that means nagpa-function pa rin sila.
Pwedeng bayaran, alam mo naman sa atin. But anyway, balik tayo dun sa kay Alaysa Malinaw. Alam mo maganda siya, Pilipina. Kaya nga
Hindi lang marunong communication skills kasi yun lang.
Tsaka actually sa personal, hindi siya yung talkative. Medyo parang mahiyain siya.
Naive.
Yeah, mahiyain. Siya,
kasi,
Peter
ganun kasi yun pag kulang ka sa communication skills, hindi ka marunong mahalubilo na,
Hindi
kasi
ka
lalo na nakita mo nandito sa Amerika. So, baka matakot magbuka ng bunganga dahil mahiya.
baka mali yung graph.
Oo, mahiya lang. Isa rin ganun di ba? Pero kung ano yun siya, nakita mo si Pia dati, di ba? Ay, shoot. Alam mo, may natago akong, ilang watch hours ka na pala?
7:20 pa, 7:50 pa lang watch hour ko.
Ako, February 18 na ako mag-apply ng kuan. Tawag nito, yung sa monetization. Marami pala ako natago ng mga videos about Pia before siya nanalo na sa Vegas. Alam ko, gawin ko talaga magandang editing.
Pumunta ka ba nung nanalo si Pia sa Vegas?
Oo, doon kami practice, interview ko siya, gano'n. Ngayon, uso ngayon si Pia sa YouTube So, ayusin ko talaga na maayos yun behind the scenes, Pia works back before she won. Parang gano'n, di ba? Oo,
Never
mga
been
gano'n.
seen.
Never been seen. Tapos, ayusin ko yung interview, tapos gano'n yan. Ilagay, isa-isahin ko pag na-monetize ako. Alam mo, trending kasi si Pia So, ayusin ko.
Next time nga pag iganapin dito ang Miss Universe sa sa Las Vegas, punta tayo.
Oo, punta tayo talaga.
Yeah.
Tapos na naman tayo, magkipag-friendship ng isang kandidata na
Walang
hindi kilala. Oo, para mapasukin, gawin tayong relative. Is na relative para mapasok.
We're so bad. Well,
Ginawa namin ni Rachel Peters, tsaka ano ba yan, Janine Tugon.
Yeah. Ba't kaya hindi nakapasok si sa top 5 si Rachel?
Well, marami pa talaga mas maganda sa kanya.
Hindi ba siya kagandahan?
Hindi siya gumanda siya. I mean, for sure, dahil yung makeup na niya, pero tsaka hindi siya confident Nakita ko talaga siya kung ang dating niya sa doon, mga feedback ng tao, is nabera ang dating niya. Kumbaga, nabera ang dating, pero aloof lang talaga siya. Yung hindi yung gaya na, wave kang gano'n. Parang, kumbaga, restricted yung mga kaway niya, tatago pa siya, parang na-disappoint yung mga tao, parang gano'n.
So ganun yung...
Tsaka makita ko talaga, even the stage, diba, cutesy, parang gano'n, tapos walang confidence na talaga. Hindi
Iba
siya
talaga si Janine Tugon.
Tama naman si Pia, yung judgment niya, ngayon, ibabash siya kung bakit hindi pinasok si Rachel Peters. Marami pa talaga mas magagaling ni Rachel Peters. Di ba nakapasok na yun because of voting din.
Pero nakaabot siya ng top 10, ha?
Kaya nga, pero sabi ko nga, nakapasok siya because of voting. Di ba, na siya, di ba yung wild card na siya. Pero kung marami pa talagang mas maganda sa kanya, tsaka mas
bakit naman hindi nakapunta ka ba doon kay Gazini?
Hindi, malayo yun, Georgia yun.
Georgia. So ano naman verdict mo doon kay Gazini?
I don't know, nakita daw kasi sa in-person nung pag-contest pa lang, parang dami niyang mali-mali, di ba? Mga cues niya, parang hindi nag-attend ng rehearsal, di ba? Dami nakita mo sa video, di ba? Instead na, the top 10, Philippines, doon na siya, lilipat na naman sa kabila. Parang syempre makikita ka ng judge din kung how can
meron bang ganun, may ganun bang...
Nandyan, may mali-mali siya makita sa YouTube. Nung pinakita na, di ba practice mo, tawagin ka top 5 o top 10. Supposedly, alam mo yan kung saan ka pupunta. Imagine mo pumunta sa kabila, tapos tumawid sa kabila. Parang luka-luka ang dating na di alam gagawin. You should have, learn kung saan banda yung director na ganon or dun sa practice, di ba? Para you would confident na alam yung ginagawa mo. Nakikita ng judges yun
Pero alam mo, in personal, maganda siya at saka very personable siya. It just
happened lang talaga na parang she sound like rehearsed talaga nung nag-speech na siya.
Well, actually, lahat naman ng speech rehearsed, di ba? Maski
She sounded like rehearsed, pero hindi yung ano ba, kumbaga,
Obvious.
natural. Oo,
Yes,
yun.
very obvious.
Obvious siya. Kasi nung magkamali siya, parang, ewan ko. Basta, it's not meant for her nga talaga.
Well, I
Pero
think,
sayang, maganda. Hindi siya nakapasok sa swimsuit. Baka lamunin sila sa swimsuit.
well, sana naman makapasok to si Rabia.
Alam mo, gustong-gusto ko yung ano niya, yung nagka-yellow siya na swimsuit. Parang bagay talaga sa kanya magrampa. Alam mo na, in the beginning, she doesn't know how to do the ramp modeling pa naman. Natutunan lang niya yun. Yung mga ano niya. Kita mo yung mga a little clip of her wearing that swimsuit na yellow.
Na nagpa-practice
Yan
pa
naman
lang.
nagpa-practice pa lang siya sa corner. Gustong-gusto ko talaga yun. Parang ang galing-galing niya doon.
Sabi
Tapos
nga
lalo
nila
na hype na.
masipag daw. Sino ba nagsabi na napakasipag daw
Si Malinaw.
Yeah.
Malinaw. Si Alisa Malinaw. They're friends. Diba?
Yeah, maski daw wala talagang si Bunso, tawagin na si Bunso, talagang practice ng practice yan. Kaya wala daw silang masabi. Talagang she deserved to win that title. So, maganda.
At saka nag-align talaga ang stars niya. Alam nga naman papanulonin mo si Gumabaw, ang dating niya kasi parang rehearse na lahat, yung pagka-volleyball player niya, ang tagal-tagal na, parang malaki talaga siya tingnan sa screen, parang mayabang na yung dating niya na, bring it on!
Well, I think I heard na para yatang gusto niya pa yata mag-try sa sa Miss World. Not this year, but I think she's planning.
Bagay siya doon. Alam ko, bagay siya doon. Para kasi na maraming sports doon eh. Tsaka yung doon, excel siya doon.
Yeah. But I don't know kung sinong...
Athletic siya.
But they said that nag-open na nga yung sa Miss World Philippines.
Meron na tayo yung parang Indian looking. Meron na, front runner na siya ngayon.
Sino?
Indian. Anong pangalan? Basta tingnan mo.
Miss World Philippines?
Miss World Philippines ngayon nag-open na. Tapos nag-audition na siya. Siya na ngayon ang front runner. She used to be a newscaster. Pero Indian siya.
Oh, really? I-check ko nga.
Half Indian. Tingnan mo.
Miss
World Philippines.
Miss World Philippines
2021 candidates.
21. Candidates. 21.
Newscaster or sabihin mo newscaster.
Newscaster candidate. Sino ba to? Si ano ba yan? Star Patrol? Krishnan?
Yes. Ayan siya. Krishnan.
Hindi ko. Taga TV Patrol pala siya.
Oo, tingnan mo yung niya. Ang tawag niyan? Audition day ba yan? Tawag nila? Application day? Interview?
Ay, oo, maganda.
Parang?
Oo. Indian siya.
Yan na naman. Yan ang gustong-gusto doon sa Miss World.
Yeah, yung pagka-Indiana yung maganda siya. May may pagka-hawig siya ni
she's not that tall. Mga lang siya, 5'5" lang siya. Or 5'6".
Yeah, natin. Ayan siya. Kikita mo?
Yes, kita ko.
Maganda siya. Ganda ang beauty niya. May hawig din kay Rabia.
Yes, uso ngayon Indian. Imagine Miss Australia, Indian.
Oo. Laban-laban na sila mga Bombay.
Ang Miss India, Miss Indian talaga.
Ano kaya pag sama-samahin sila sa isang room?
Imagine kung si Miss Thailand, kung si Dina ang nanalo, Indian din 'yon.
Hindi ko feel yung Miss Thailand na yan.
Kaya nga ang feel ko yung first runner-up, Indian 'yon.
Yeah, mas maganda 'yon kung yun ang nanalo.
Tsaka magaling maglakad, natural ang lakad.
Itong parang trying
Pilit pa robot, no? Robot, parang robot yung
maging Catriona version 2.
Oo, yung legs niya parang masyadong straight na parang
Yeah. Parang hindi ko nakikita yung sa kanya. Na parang gigil siya na hindi katulad ng nakaraan na mga yung mga talagang Thai, yung katulad yung lumaban sa sa Miss
Catriona.
Philippines. Sino yun?
Oo, yun
Si
yun.
Chalita.
Oo,
Gusto ko yung beauty ng Chalitang yun.
Pero ano nga, nung ba no, nag-represent doon kay Catriona, yung sarili ilang kuan, pinanalo lang lang kasi marunong mag-English, pero was beauty naman, uy, dapat si Vina ang manalo doon.
Walang substance kung mag-ano.
Oo. Tapos ano lang, si Vina sana yun, kaso lang ayaw ng taya at sa mga Indians.
Yeah, it's so sad.
Second runner-up siya doon, tapos ngayon first runner-up.
Nag-ano na rin ba? Nag-join na rin ba yung dati?
Oh,
Akala ko first time niya na.
tingnan mo yung batch ni nila ni
Pawin Suda.
Pawin Suda. Di pa yun. Okay, nga, Pawin Suda, sila ang batch.
I-check natin. Sino Miss...
At saka...
Miss Thailand winners. Anong year? 2019?
18.
18. Okay.
Second runner-up siya.
Ito? Hindi, wala siya naman dito
Nandyan siya, basta
totoo.
Si V, maganda.
Second runner-up siya.
Oo, second runner-up siya, nasa pinakadulo.
Oo, ito.
Front runner siya dyan. Bigla na siya. Bakit pinanalo si
Magaling mag-English kasi to
Galing English, tapos oh my gosh, tapos maputi yan talaga siya. Yung parang gusto ng Thailand.
I think gusto ng Thailand talaga marunong mag-English kasi parang yung naging nila trending Kasi yung naging last Miss Universe nila, from the US talaga nag-aral dito sa California, taga Samba yan.
Kilala ko yun. Si taga LA, East LA yun
Yeah, taga East LA siya.
1988 yun.
Si Muk
Porn tip na Corin Kanok.
Porn tip. Yeah, si Porn tip.
Nakiring Kanok.
Ito ang sinasabi ko sa'yo. Ayan, ito. Ayan.
Chalita naman yan.
Yan ang gusto ko, si Chalita.
Oo. Pero yung niyan, previous niya, after, yung sa 17, naman yun, foreigner din, marunong mag-English. Yung matangkad kabatch ni Peters. Kaso lang nawindang sa
anong say mo naman sa dito? Ayan.
Catriona din
Hindi yan si Catriona.
Hindi nga, Catriona look-alike nga rin. Pero alam mo, batch niya si yung 2017.
Sino?
Yung nag-represent kayo yung sabay ni Peters. Yung
Nag-join na ba ito sa Miss Thailand before?
Yes, ang dami ng sinalihan yan.
Marami
Oo, nakaano yan siya. Second runner-up din siya doon. Nag-represent sa Miss Earth sa Philippines. 2017.
Ay, ito.
Kaya sumikat.
Yeah, you're right. This one.
Oo, kaya sumikat siya sa sa Philippines. Sikat siya doon kasi maganda siya, marunong mag-English.
Pero magaganda ang beauty ng Thailand, lalo na itong first runner-up na ito. Maganda yung beauty nito. I like the beauty of this one.
Oo, pero hindi na sila nag-rejoin Dapat nag-rejoin yan.
Yeah. Pero ito talaga ang winner. Di ba?
Oo. Gosh, alam mo, kapapalabas mo lang yung video ko na Kiyomi. Tapos ngayon pala itsura ko. My gosh, Kiyomi.
Maganda Ang ganda ng aura mo doon.
Pero ngayon ba, after 5 years, my God.
I know. Ito si Chalita. Yan ang gusto ko sa Chalita. Tapos
ito rin. Dito nag-umpisa dyan.
Ito, matangkad lang siya
Oo, 15 yan. Nag-umpisa yan siya. Siya, yung best in national costume sila sa Vegas.
But you know what? Merong may bago na naman tayong Miss Grand International. Kilala mo yan? Miss Grand
Kilala ko yan.
International Philippines.
Samantha. Si Samantha?
Hindi si Samantha. 2020.
Si Samantha Lo nga yan.
Ayan, ang ating Miss Grand International.
Samantha nga yan.
Bernardo, hindi Samantha Lo.
Hindi ko sa Samantha, previous niyan si Samantha Lo.
Oo, si Samantha Samantha Bernardo, taga Palawan. Pero
Pero alam mo
ano
na nangyayari kay Samantalo?
ano ba nangyari doon sa
Nanalo pa siya ng Miss Body International sa
saan?
Philippines. Siya
Talaga?
nanalo.
Kailan?
Last year,
Saan?
sumali sa Philippines. Nanalo.
Oh? Ano na?
Galing kasi sumagot. Tingnan mo, Samantalo, question and answer niya. Ang galing din kasi sumagot na kahit hindi marunong maglakad.
Saan to? Samantalo, saan? Samantalo,
Ano yata, Miss Body Shots yata
Q,
or
and
Super Buds, parang ganun.
Super Bad.
2020.
2020.
Century 2 na ba yung kinasa nila?
Ay, ito siya. Ayan.
Oo.
Ito.
Siya yan. Oo.
Ay, kasama
Nanalo
niya
nga
pala
siya.
si ano.
Sam.
Merong
Represent,
merong tawag nito. Ano ba? May controversial na video.
Sino si Sam?
Oo.
Johnny?
Oo.
Wala, hanapin ko nga. Meron pala.
Meron.
Ang gusto pa lang si si yung
I think mostly naman
Mr. World,
Mr.
World
nga
na
si Mr. World di ba?
first runner-up.
Kasi minsan pag nakakabisita ako sa mga di ba pag may nagpo-post sa beauty pageant may nagko-comment.
Biglang
may out of the blue may nagko-post. Sino 'yun? Nakikita mo lang may mga link tapos gano'n pala.
Ano yan?
Siya pala, nanalo siya.
Nanalo. Ano yan? Everbell.
Alam ko may pamilya na to si Sam Adjani. Yan ko bakit
Nag-represent na ng yan Mr. World
hindi rin, walang hindi marunong.
Sumali siya uli dyan.
Hindi marunong magsalita.
Galing mo sumagot ni Minilo. Tingnan mo talaga. Magaling na talaga siya sumagot. Hanapin yung
nahanap ko, wala namang
Super Bad sa YouTube.
Super Bad? Okay, hanapin mo na Super Bad.
2020 Samantalo. Question and answer niya.
Super Bad Samantalo Q and A 2020?
2020.
Ito?
Tsaka yung performance niya, total performance.
Check natin.
Parang robot talaga si Samantha.
Nag-improve yung lakad niya.
Parang kasing binabading-bading style si Samantha. Matutuwa ang mga bading sa kanya.
Hindi siya umubra doon.
Parang macho talaga siya.
Pero I heard na parang daw ito
tomboyish talaga yan.
Yeah. Yung mga bali-balita nila. Alam mo naman sa
Kasi soccer player, alam mo na, maraming ganyan. Sa Bohol nga, ang daming nanalo na mga tomboy na naging Miss Bohol. Naging lawyer. Para ang gaganda kasi ng legs, ang kutis, mga babae.
Ito. Yung host.
Pwede. Teka, paano yung mag-question? Pinggan mo question. Galing ni Samantha.
Positively or negatively affects body image for today's youth?
Maureen's a good friend of mine, so thank you, Mo, for that question. I believe that it affects both ways, actually. It's how you perceive it, it's how you show it. I was always told that something's always wrong with me. My body's not this way, I walk a certain way, and I realized that, I shouldn't listen to those people. And I found people who did love me and cherish me for who I am and all the flaws that I have. So, when we post on social media about...
Alam mo, the way mag-answer siya, talagang galing sa loob niya. Yun ang kagandahan na hindi rehearse. Yun ang kagandahan na makikita mo talaga yung sincerity ng answer niya.
At saka advantage kasi Romeo, marunong din mag-English Kaya kung marunong ka sa utak mo, hindi sabihin, advantage na rin yun.
Mag-construct ng ng thoughts mo in English na maintindihan.
Kaya nga.
Hindi ka makika rito na hindi mo naman ginagamit ng maayos yung English mo, parang baliwala rin. Ito talagang educated siya. Educated.
Oo.
Body image. I always post to love yourself, to be patient with yourself, to embrace every flaw that you have. And That's all I want for the youth today, is that positive image. Thank you.
Yeah. Tama nga naman yung
Yes,
kailangan maging
tama.
honest sa sarili mo.
Nanalo siya.
Ay, nanalo talaga siya?
Siya nanalo dahil din sa question and answer na yan.
Akala ko noon kasi itong super body na to, katawan lang ang basihan, walang question and answer.
Oo, meron yan.
Bago to
Siya ko nga mga kalaban niya, ang gaganda talaga ng katawan. Si
Yung
ano, di
Kim
ba
Rose na
nanalo?
yun,
Si ano,
lumaban
di
din
ba
yung
dati na?
Binibining Pilipinas
Di ba Bikini Open naman nanalo yung si ano? Nanalo si... Anong pangalan yung labandera siya? Ay, yung taga-bahay. Tapos nanalo ng Miss Philippines International kabatch ni Tia. Si Lumita. Anong pangalan niya?
Lumibaw?
Janicel Lumiba.
Janicel Lumibaw?
Sabi
nanalo
niya,
sa Miss Bikini.
Kaya nga, siya, wala namang question yata doon.
Yeah. Ay, hindi siya bikini. Scuba. Scuba, tapos nag-Miss World, tapos nag-Binibini. Yeah. Yeah.
Scuba pala yun.
Yeah, Scuba. Taga Palawan siya
Ang ganda naman talaga ng katawan.
Ganda ng katawan.
Tsaka first time nga nila na nagkapagpadala daw ng maitim sa Miss International kaya nga naswerte pa rin na nakuha tayo sa semifinals. Magaling naman talaga siya magkuan, di ba? Pa-sexy. Hi, are you ready?
Ready. I've been waiting for
Okay. Tawag ako mamaya sa'yo, ha? Tawag ako ng ano.
Sige.
Excuse lang ba?
Okay, balik ka. Okay. Sige, balik na lang daw siya. Na lang. Okay. Okay. Umalis muna ang ating guest speaker. Okay, manood ulit tayo dito. Yan. Ilang oras na? Naka 240 hours na. Okay. Let's back to this one. Pinanonood ko. Impeachment trial. Four weeks pa yan. 1 day ago.
Former President Donald Trump tonight declared not guilty of the impeachment charge he incited insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th.
And he is hereby acquitted of the charge in said article.
7 Republican senators voting with Democrats to convict, 57 to 43, the most bipartisan Senate impeachment vote in history, but far short of the 2/3 majority needed to convict. 43 Republicans voted not guilty, including Republican leader Mitch McConnell. But McConnell still offered a blistering indictment of Trump's actions.
Scores that impeachment was never meant to be the final forum for American justice. President Trump is still liable for everything he did while he was in office.
The former president defiant in a statement calling the trial a witch hunt and insisting our historic, patriotic, and beautiful movement to make America great again has only just begun. The vote coming just over a month after rioters invaded the Capitol and took the very chamber where the vote was held. Then Vice President Pence rushed to safety as he was hunted in the halls. Senators casting their votes tonight from desks that were ransacked by the rioters.
We're outnumbered. There's a million of us out there, and we are listening to Trump. You're a boss.
After then President Trump said he would walk to the Capitol with them.
We fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
The final moments of Donald Trump's historic second impeachment trial playing out after a day of missteps and confusion.
The debate is not in order.
At the last minute, House managers unexpectedly calling to subpoena a witness to explain how the top House Republican leader called President Trump on the 6th to beg for his help.
The president said, well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are.
And Casey, this was the shortest impeachment trial ever.
That's right, Jose, and they didn't call witnesses today in part because members of both parties were anxious to move on. Many Republicans want to put the Trump era behind them, and Democrats want to focus on President Biden's coronavirus relief package to speed vaccine distribution and send more stimulus checks to Americans. They're racing to pass that bill before unemployment benefits expire for millions in mid-March. Jose?
Tonight, the dangerous winter storms hitting much of the nation. A coast-to-coast ice out, blinding snow and dangerous ice across the south. Highways frozen solid. The fiery multiple-car pileup in Oklahoma. In Texas, 1,000 accidents there alone.
All of Texas is facing a extremely dangerous winter storm.
In Mississippi, this car flips and catches fire. Outrage and vindication. Both sides blasting the other after President Trump's acquittal, and the Republicans who voted to convict now under fire as the former president plots his next move.
The Trump movement is alive and well.
New cases plummeting, COVID reaching the lowest levels we've seen in months. What's behind the plunge? And the new vaccination milestone, 2 million doses given in just 1 year. One side declaring vindication, the other outraged. And President Biden is now weighing in. Kelly O'Donnell is at the White House.
After a second Trump acquittal, tonight Democrats are rendering their own verdict.
It was by far the most bipartisan decision and a complete repudiation of the president's conduct.
Mr. Rounds, not guilty.
House managers did persuade a majority of senators. All 50 Democrats plus 7 Republicans voted guilty. Democrats confident in what they presented, but frustrated.
We didn't need more witnesses. We needed more senators with spines.
Today, no regrets from the 7 Senate Republicans who voted to convict. 3 were just reelected themselves to 6-year terms, giving them a political buffer. Louisiana Republican Bill Cassidy predicts his vote to convict will gain support over time.
I'm attempting to hold President Trump accountable, and that is the trust I have from the people that elected me.
Of the 7, only Alaska's Lisa Murkowski faces re-election next year. Today, in a withering new statement, Murkowski said that Mr. Trump swore an oath to defend America and all that we hold sacred. He failed to uphold that oath. Late Saturday night, President Biden released a statement where he seized on GOP leader Mitch McConnell's own words, rebuking Mr. Trump's conduct as a
disgraceful dereliction of duty.
Reaching across party to assess Mr. Trump the same way as
practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it.
And Kelly, President Biden is trying to move past the impeachment.
Well, Jose, this coming week, he will be making his first official trips as president, being sworn in just a month ago, heading to Wisconsin for a televised town hall, and then Michigan to visit a Pfizer vaccine plant, a chance to reclaim some of the spotlight. Jose?
Kelly O'Donnell at the White House. Thank you. There are growing questions tonight about what former President Trump will do now that he was once again acquitted. His allies claim he'll retain his position atop the Republican Party, but his legal troubles are far from over. Here's Jeff Bennett.
Former President Donald Trump emboldened after escaping Senate conviction. His allies arguing his acquittal only cements his central role within the GOP.
The Trump movement is alive and well. All I can say is that the most potent force in the Republican Party is President Trump.
Trump hinting at what's on the horizon. In the months ahead, I have much to share with you, and I look forward to continuing our incredible journey together. He's sitting on a roughly $30 million war chest, according to federal campaign filings, which he could use to back primary challenges by candidates he supports, as the Republican Party spirals into an internal fight over its future direction. But uncertainty looms over nearly every aspect of Trump's post-impeachment life. From his political future to the possibility he could face criminal charges, now without the legal protections afforded sitting presidents. Prosecutors in Georgia announcing a new investigation into his attempts to overturn the state's 2020 election results.
something occurred here within my jurisdiction that may be criminal. And if that is the case, it needed to be investigated.
In New York, prosecutors are probing financial dealings around some of Trump's best-known Manhattan properties, according to the Wall Street Journal, scrutinizing loans he took out on Trump Tower and Trump International Hotel, among others. The Trump Organization did not respond to NBC News' request for comment. And then there's the possibility Trump could still face consequences for inciting the deadly Capitol insurrection, as suggested by Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell.
We have a criminal justice system in this country. We have civil litigation. And former presidents are not immune from being accountable by either one.
And Jeff joins us now from Washington. Jeff, Senator Lindsey Graham says he's headed to Florida to meet with Trump.
That's right, and he says he's going to encourage Trump to work with Republicans to ensure they win back the House and Senate in 2022. But even those Republicans who are eager to move on from Trump, they're still grappling with the fact that he's still very popular among the party's base. Jose?
Jeff Bennett in Washington, thank you. We have some good news in the fight against COVID. The number of daily new cases is dropping dramatically, now just a third of what it was just a month ago. And we hit a new record high for vaccinations in a single day. These are the reasons for optimism, but as
Mount Olive Eagle Company. Check ko nga ito.
Welcome to Mount Olive Pickle Company. Have you ever wondered what goes into making the perfect Mount Olive pickle? Well, here at the corner of Cucumber and Vine, our recipe for success is a mixture of ingredients: rich traditions, attention to quality, and a bit of fun. Mount Olive has been in business since 1926. We got our start at the turn of the last century, when a large produce market operated here in Mount Olive, North Carolina. A local entrepreneur saw opportunity in the bumper crops of cucumbers that were going to waste. His original idea for selling brined cucumbers to other pickle companies fell through, and he found himself in something of a, well, you know. But a group of Mount Olive businessmen saw promise in a pickling operation. They reasoned a new market for area farmers would be good for the whole community. So, in January 1926, they established the Mount Olive Pickle Company, with 1 acre of land and less than $20,000 in capital. Old coffee pots were used to pour syrup into the jars. From that modest beginning, Mount Olive has grown to become the best-selling brand of pickles in the country, with distribution in all 50 states. Today, the perfect pickle packing process begins with the best quality cucumbers. Each year, we buy millions of pounds of fresh cucumbers and peppers in 10 states, as well as several foreign countries. About 1/3 of what we buy is grown right here in North Carolina. From the fields of these independent growers, the cucumbers are delivered to receiving stations, where they're inspected and graded for size and quality. The cucumbers are then delivered to Mount Olive by truck. Mount Olive receives its fresh cucumbers in a variety of ways: in plastic bins, in cardboard containers, in barrels, or in bulk. Bulk-loaded cucumbers are washed out of the truck with a powerful water hose. Mount Olive packs 2 basic types of pickles: processed and fresh pack. The cucumbers arriving at Mount Olive will either go into the plant for packing as fresh pack pickles, or they'll be placed in one of Mount Olive's 1,100 brine tanks to be fermented as processed pickles. Typically, the tanks are filled with cucumbers in the summer and emptied in the winter.
Our tank yard has approximately 1,100 tanks. They're about an 800 bushel equivalent, which is about 8,000 gallons in a tank. That equates to about 40 million pounds of cucumbers that we tank on our yard.
Filling up the tanks in the tank yard requires some heavy lifting.
It takes about 200 bushels to fill a big bin. We move that then to the tank where we open the bin and all the cucumbers fall into the tank. It takes about 4 trips with a big bin to fill the tank. Once we fill the tank, we put a wooden headboard on top of the tank to keep the cucumbers submerged, and then our fermentation process begins.
Processed pickles include Mount Olive's relishes and salad cubes, sweet pickles, sour pickles, dill, and some kosher dill. Fresh pack pickles are fresh cucumbers that don't undergo a fermentation process in the tank yard. They're simply washed and placed into jars for packing. Fresh pack items include bread and butter pickles, kosher dill pickles, and peppers. You'll find the words Fresh Pack on the label of these products in your grocery store. When it's time for the cucumbers to be packed into jars, whether processed or fresh pack, the cucumbers first get a thorough washing. Once cleaned, the cucumbers move from the outside into the cutting department, where they're cut into chips, spears, sandwich stuffers, relish, salad cubes, or left whole. The cukes are blanched and sent to the packing department, ready to be put into jars. The empty jars arrive at Mount Olive on pallets. They're placed on the production line by machine. The jars are washed and inspected as they go into the packing room. We pack most of our products by machine, like this one, which shakes the pickles into the jars as they go by. Pickles that don't fall into the jars recirculate for more tries. Employees called toppers use rubber mallets to make sure the jars are full and ready to be capped. While most of our products are machine packed, some, like our spears and sandwich stuffers, are packed by hand. Our hand packers pack a jar of spears on average every 12 seconds. Once the cucumbers are in the jars, the pickle juice, or cover brine, is added. This gives the pickles their flavor. We make our pickle juice using these 400-gallon mixers. We start with the base ingredients, usually vinegar and water, and we test the levels of vinegar and salt on each batch prior to use. Then we carefully measure the flavorings and other ingredients and add it to the base. Once the jars have both pickles and juice, they're capped and vacuum sealed. Now that the jars are capped, they're pasteurized, a process that makes our pickles shelf stable. Inside these 100-foot-long pasteurizers, jars of pickles move through 10 different temperature zones. The pickles are heated to just the right temperature and then cooled very quickly. Depending on the size of the jars, this process takes about an hour. From the pasteurizer, the pickles go into the finished goods department, where labels are added, and a best if used by date and production code are printed on each jar. The production code indicates which day of the year the jar is packed and which production shift did the packing. Now that the jars are finished, they're prepared for shipping. We use cardboard trays instead of boxes to use less cardboard. Our tray packing machines handle the jars with care by building the trays around the jars. They also allow Mount Olive to pack different sizes of cases.
What this machine allows us to do is go from a 12-pack case to a 6-pack case to a 4-pack case whatever fits the individual customer. We're very flexible with this machine.
The production code information is printed on each tray, and the trays are shrink-wrapped. A robotic palletizer automatically stacks the cases onto pallets, building one layer at a time. The cases are placed in specific patterns to ensure the pallets are stable. The pallets are then stretch-wrapped. Throughout the process, quality is vigorously maintained.
In quality control, we check each step of the manufacturing process to make sure that our products are consistent and that we maintain our quality standards. The testing that we do in the quality control lab is titratable acidity, salt, pH, and BOM-A, which measures the sweetness.
The finished pallets go to one of our warehouses for storage until they're shipped from our distribution center.
We're the #1 brand of pickles, peppers, and relishes in the United States. And with that, our warehouse storage needs as well as our production capacity have grown. We have approximately 1 million square feet of warehouse storage space that allows us to store about 7 million cases. It's a lot of pickles.
Making the perfect Mount Olive pickle not only requires the best ingredients, it also requires the best people. We have over 600 employees year-round, and we hire another 350 seasonal workers in the busy summer months. We're proud of our diverse work group and the job they do. The pickle people at Mount Olive pack millions of jars of pickles, peppers, and relishes each year. And for us, safety is a big deal. As a result, Mount Olive is a Carolina Star Site, which is the highest recognition the North Carolina Department of Labor gives for effective safety and health management. In addition, Mount Olive and its employees are environmentally responsible. The company runs an elaborate wastewater treatment system. We recycle everything from plastics to cardboard to glass. And we pay careful attention to how we use our resources, like water, to help protect our environment. But making the perfect pickle isn't all we do. Because of our roots, we believe it's important to make a stronger community, too. Our company partners with local schools, sponsors youth sports teams, and supports dozens of local programs and initiatives with both our money and our products. And we encourage our employees to be active in nonprofit and civic groups. We also like to have fun. We're a major sponsor of the award-winning North Carolina Pickle Festival, held every year here in Mount Olive on the last full weekend of April. It's a dilly of a festival, drawing thousands every year. Proceeds benefit community projects year-round. And finally, we invite you to join us here at the corner of Cucumber and Vine every New Year's Eve. We drop a glowing 3-foot pickle down our company flagpole into a perfectly preserved redwood pickle tank at the stroke of 7 o'clock midnight. In case you're wondering, when it's 7 o'clock in Mount Olive, it's actually midnight Greenwich Mean Time. We get started at 6 o'clock, and we encourage you to get here early. The whole thing's over at 7:05.
The secrets to our success are we focus on producing a quality product, we have a place where our employees enjoy coming to work, and we continue to nurture our hometown roots. We have not forgotten the values which brought us to where we are today.
We hope you've enjoyed this visual tour of the Mount Olive Pickle Company. To learn more about our company, please visit us on the web at MountOlivePickles.com. And be sure to remember us on your next trip to the grocery store.
Several millennia before it ever adorned a martini, the olive and its oil were central to many ancient economies. Today, olives remain as popular as ever. Not only are they tasty, they're also healthy, low in calories and cholesterol, and high in dietary fiber and iron. Olives are inedible unless they're pickled. These gourmet olives are stuffed by hand with all kinds of fillings, from almonds to garlic and even blue cheese. Straight from the field, they go into barrels of brine. For 9 months they ferment, their hard and bitter flesh becoming softer and sweeter. Then it's onto a conveyor that takes them to the cleaning area, where workers remove leaves and other debris. Next, they drop onto a belted conveyor. The openings between the belts gradually widen. As an olive reaches an opening exceeding its width, it falls through into a barrel below. By the time the olives reach the end of the conveyor, they're all sorted by size, from small to extra large. The next stop is the pitting room. The first phase of the pitting operation is a spinning drum with olive-sized pockets lining its perimeter. As the drum rotates, an olive settles into each pocket. This lines them up so that they exit the drum in a line onto the conveyor that transports them to the pitting machine. The machine pits 900 olives every minute. Let's slow it down to show you what happens. A coring knife enters one end of the olive, pushing the pit or stone out of the other end. As the pit exits, it creates a hole that's a good size for stuffing. Inspection. Workers weed out any olives that aren't perfect. They then get sent to the stuffing department. These beauties are being stuffed with pickled garlic. The stuffer cuts the garlic and then inserts one piece into each olive. It's the same procedure with other fillings, such as jalapeno peppers, sun-dried tomatoes, habanero peppers, onions, almonds, and more. Workers empty the baskets of stuffed olives onto a table of empty jars, spreading them around until every jar is full. On their way to the capping machine, the open jars pass under nozzles that fill them with fresh brine. An air jet blows off a small amount to help the cap go on easily. From there, it's into the capping machine, which twists a lid on each jar, heat sealing it for an airtight fit. Then stamping on a lot number for tracking purposes. Finally, the jars head into a machine that rolls on a label. The brine serves as a natural preservative, giving these gourmet olives a 2-year shelf life. Unless it's my shelf, in which case they last 2 days.
Yes. Very interesting. What are fancy eggs? How it's made? Already know how. So why is that? Why?
We all know olives grow on trees, right? So how come you've never seen a fresh, tree-ripened olive in the produce section at the grocery store? Why are they always swimming in salty brine? Oh, and did you know that black olives are really green? Everything you know about these salty, oily stone fruits just might be a lie. Legend has it that the Greek goddess Athena won naming rights to the city of Athens thanks to her gift of olives. But while the Olea europaea tree is valued for its wood and oil, the fresh fruit tastes absolutely disgusting. The main culprit is a bitter compound called oleuropein, and ripe olives contain a ton of it, up to 14% by dry weight. Professional olive processors and intrepid home cooks have 3 main options to get the oleuropein out and make olives taste not terrible. Soaking them in water or fermenting them in salt brine can slowly leach away the bitter compound, but that takes weeks. Option 3 is a chemical shortcut. It involves soaking the olives in sodium hydroxide. Good old NaOH is commonly known as lye, and it's used in soap making. Instead of soaking out the bitter oleuropein over time, sodium hydroxide speeds up its chemical breakdown to less bitter compounds, like hydroxytyrosol. The lye takes a week or so to do its job depending on the process. Caustic lye doesn't end up in your food since the olives are then thoroughly rinsed. Then they're packed in a salt brine that helps preserve them before they're shipped. But the lye does have one other effect on your olives, at least the familiar canned ones. The kind you put on pizza, the ones you might have put on your fingers as a kid as little puppets. Just me? Okay. Those don't start out black. Fresh olives do come in a color spectrum, but the ones you probably buy didn't come off the tree looking like leather boots. Back in the late 1800s, olives were mostly grown for oil, but a California farmer named Frida Amon couldn't use her crop for oil and needed a way to sell the bitter fruit instead. So she started experimenting with a process that not only preserved them, but made them taste better. It also turned her green olives black. She did it by mixing air into the olives during the lye treatment, which exposes them to oxygen. When oxygen is present, hydroxytyrosol and other compounds in the olives undergo further chemical reactions that create dark brown or black pigments. Those chemicals aren't totally stable and can degrade over time, giving the olives an unappetizing mottled look, like this cat, but less adorable. You know who's a good boy. So the growers also add a fixative in the form of ferrous gluconate. The iron forms a complex and stops the olives from turning catty, so they come out of the can a shiny, uniform black. This processing is known as ripe olive style or California style. Not all lye-treated olives turn black. If no oxygen is present, those color-changing reactions don't happen and the olives stay green. What does this mean to you? Not a whole lot. Oxygen is reactive stuff. Not only can it turn green olives black, but it can also change a lot of the flavor compounds that we love in more gently cured olives. But the black ones are still pretty tasty on pizza, like pineapple. Haters, I'll meet you in the comments. If you're feeling salty about the lies you've been told about olives, don't be. Just thank chemistry that you're able to enjoy them. And hey, I know you hear this from every channel that you watch on YouTube, but it would be a real cool thing if you could hit that subscribe button and keep coming back. And if you happen to already be subscribed, could you hit that bell right there so you get a notification whenever we upload so you don't miss any reactions videos? We hope to see you back here next week, and please remember, pineapples definitely belong on pizza.
Okay, with that, I'll see you again in my next live stream. Thank you for watching now. Bye-bye.